Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to Paranormal M. I hope you're doing well tonight. If you enjoy the stories in this video, please give it a like. And if you've had any strange or unexplained experiences yourself, feel free to send them to me. The first story tonight takes place in a new high-rise apartment on Oahu. A young couple had just moved in with their cat Bean, and at first, it felt like the perfect first place together. But pretty soon, the bathroom started to feel a little off. Let's start there, and I hope you sleep well tonight. So let me start by saying I'm 25, and I live with my girlfriend, who's 23, and our cat Benny in a small apartment in Honolulu. We moved into this brand new high-rise not too long ago. The building was finished recently, and before that, the lot had just been empty dirt for as long as I could remember. Our place is a one-bedroom, one-bath, maybe around 650 square feet, and we were the very first people to live in this unit. At first, everything felt wonderful. It was our first real place together, just ours, and there was this kind of excitement in making it feel like home. But after a while, both of us started noticing this strange feeling in the bathroom. The bathroom is right by the front door, and I don't know how else to explain it except that the air in there felt different, heavy, like you weren't completely alone, even when you knew you were. Last week, I brought over a small Bible my aunt had given me a while back. It had been sitting at my parents' house, and for some reason I felt like I should have it with me. After that, things seemed to get more intense. The feeling of being watched in the bathroom got stronger. It wasn't constant, but it was enough that both my girlfriend and I noticed it separately. Then tonight, we woke up from a nap around 8 p.m. because our alarms went off. We stayed in bed for maybe 20 minutes, just talking quietly, still half asleep. My girlfriend got up first to use the bathroom, and when she came back, she was quiet. I didn't think much of it at the time. A little later, I went in there myself. I didn't turn the light on. I just sat down, opened YouTube on my phone, and kind of zoned out in the dark. After about 5 minutes, I started hearing this breathing. It was close. Really close. Like it was right beside me on my left. At first, I thought maybe Benny had slipped into the bathroom with me and was sniffing around under the sink or near the toilet, because he does weird little cat patrols like that. But then I realized that made no sense. If he had been trapped in there with me, he would have been yelling at the door immediately. So I turned off the video, switched on my phone flashlight, and looked around. Nothing. But once the video was off, I could hear the breathing even more clearly. It got deeper, slower, more dragged out. It sounded hollow, almost like someone trying to breathe across a blocked nose. I just sat there, frozen, trying to figure out where it was coming from. And then I realized it sounded like it was coming from behind the shower curtain. I stood up and pulled the curtain back. The breathing stopped, just stopped. I turned the bathroom light on after that and tried to come up with every normal explanation I could. Maybe the toilet seat was shifting, maybe pipes, maybe someone upstairs or downstairs was using their shower, maybe some weird echo through the walls. I moved around. I flushed. I checked the curtain. I tried to recreate the sound. Nothing came close. So I washed my hands and got out of there. When I went back to the bedroom, my girlfriend was still lying there, wide awake. I told her what happened, and that's when she finally told me why she had been so quiet earlier. She said when she was in the bathroom, also in the dark, she saw something out of the corner of her eye. She said it looked like a head peeking out from the side of the shower curtain. I honestly don't know what to say. I've believed in this kind of thing since I was a kid, because I saw strange things in my parents' house growing up. But this has me shaken in a way I wasn't expecting. A friend told me to take oil and mark small crosses on the doors, windows, and closets, starting from the back of the apartment and moving toward the front, while saying a prayer for protection at each one. I think we're going to do that, because right now, I don't think either of us is sleeping tonight. Hey, I want to share something really personal with you. It's about my wife Lacey and a strange, almost supernatural journey we've been through together. I promise, it's a story about love, loss, and a little bit of mystery that no one saw coming. You see, Lacey was in a terrible car accident back in early spring of 2020. It wasn't just a simple crash. It was more like a car launching itself at her at a crossroads, nearly 55 miles per hour. The impact was brutal. She hit the pavement so hard that her throat and collarbone were fractured, and her left arm broke in 3 places. It was one of the most terrifying moments of my life. We spent those first days in the hospital, surrounded by the sterile smell of disinfectant and the quiet beeping of machines. I remember sitting by her side, watching her pale face through the tubes and monitors. The doctors were worried about her concussion and the fine motor skills in her left arm. But it was a nurse, one quiet, compassionate soul, who hinted at the thing that would be the hardest to heal, her throat. At first, the doctors told her not to speak at all. She had to rest her throat, so no talking for weeks. She had to wear this awful metallic neck brace, something that looked like it belonged in a medieval torture chamber. Lacey was so low-spirited. It broke my heart to see her like that. But even then, she was so thankful for the little things, holding my hand, a gentle squeeze from her family. Weeks turned into months. Her broken bones mended, but her voice, it never came back. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't speak. I remember one day, standing in the kitchen, looking into her eyes and telling her I loved her. All she could manage was this agonizing, wheezing whistle. Then suddenly, she panicked, locking herself in the bathroom, trying to scream, but all that came out was silence. We tried everything. Hours of exhausting vocal exercises, minor surgeries, even some homemade remedies she found online. One time, she drank this concoction of rosemary, olive oil, and some strange flower extract. It gave her stomach cramps for days. Each time, the result was the same. She would break down in tears, locked away in the bathroom. Watching her despair again and again, it was unbearable. I couldn't just stand there, feeling helpless. I dove headfirst into finding a cure for her. I scoured forums, emails, everything I could during work breaks. I even made a second email account just to sift through the endless spam and scams. Most leads were dead ends or nonsense, but I kept going, desperate for hope. Then, one day, an unusual email slipped through my spam filter. It was from an auto-generated account, but the message stopped me cold. Don't worry, I know what you're going through. I know someone who can help. Don't be alarmed and follow these simple steps. 1. Plant and care for the seeds. 2. Welcome the guest. 3. Listen to the song. 4. Don't pick the white one. I thought it was a prank or some weird internet thing and ignored it. But 3 days later, a small white envelope appeared on our doorstep. Inside, a packet of unmarked seeds. I hesitated. I even thought about flushing them down the toilet. But Lacey was locked in the bathroom again, sobbing quietly. The sound of her broken throat sniffling was unbearable. I couldn't ignore it. I planted those seeds in our front yard's flower bed, watered them, and felt ridiculous. To my surprise, the seeds sprouted quickly. Little stalks, then buds, then these stunning royal blue sunflowers. They were smaller than usual sunflowers, but radiant and cheerful. Lacey loved them immediately. She tried bringing some inside in pots, but they kept dying. So we left them outside, our quiet blue companions in a dark year. One night, things got tough. Lacey and I argued. She got frustrated because I talked too much and she couldn't respond easily. I tried to keep my thoughts in check, but it felt like walking on eggshells. So I started spending more time in the garage, tinkering with little projects. That night, fixing the porch light, I noticed a shadow watching me from the road. It was a person, I was sure, tall, cloaked in something large. I called out, but no answer. The wind rattled the flower bed, and I remembered that strange email. "I think I'm supposed to welcome you," I said aloud, half to myself, half to the shadow. "If not, well, have a good night. But just, you are welcome." When I looked back, the shadow was gone. After that, Lacey would often stand by the window, staring in that same direction. I asked her what she saw, but she just sighed and walked away. I stopped asking. She'd also start locking herself in the bathroom more, and we began sleeping in separate beds. She said she needed space, that love shouldn't feel like an obligation. I understood. I moved to the guest room, but she still made my bed while I was away. There was still love, even if it was quiet now. I hadn't thought much about the third rule from the email. Listen to the song. There was no song, or so I thought. But then one day, I realized Lacey was humming. It was faint, a calming nursery rhyme, like a music box melody, melancholic yet gentle. I asked her about it. She typed into her speech app, "No idea. Nursery rhyme?" I started humming along. I even made up lyrics to it, writing them down during a lunch break. "You're my friend, I'll sing your tune. A setting sun to rising moon. I ask you, buddy, buddy blue, won't you be a sunflower too?" I showed it to her when I got home. She stared at the paper, eyes wide and lost. Then she panicked, locking herself in the bathroom, crying harder than ever. I banged on the door, yelling, "Just talk to me. Use the app, please." Silence. Then a paper slid under the door. On it, my lyrics, with a big, "Fuck you," scrawled across in black eyeliner. That night, I was close to breaking. November was settling in, and even the blue sunflowers were drooping. I took a long, cold walk through a storm, leaves whipping against my face, trying to clear my mind. I ended up at a local bar, desperate for distraction. I struck up a conversation with two steel mill workers. After a few drinks, I told them about Lacey, the accident, and the mysterious email. One of them looked at me sharply and said, "I've heard of that, the silver tongue game." They explained it was an old superstition from the 1910s, kids trying to become great singers by playing this game. The 4 rules I'd received? They were part of it. Planting seeds meant swallowing sunflower seeds and drinking water. Welcoming the guest meant breaking a rule. Listening to the song meant singing a specific nursery rhyme aloud. And the last? Don't pick the white one. Because if you did, the devil would trick you. I texted Lacey, but no response. The wind was picking up. The brothers left and I started walking home, feeling more anxious than ever. When I arrived, the front door was open. My heart pounded as I whispered, "No, no, no," over and over. "Lacey?" The house was silent, except for the wind. I rushed to the bathroom, locked as always. I pounded on the door, then ran to get my tools. Outside, I saw a shadow again. I flicked the porch light on, and the figure stepped into the glow. I'll never forget her. She was enormous, hunched in a crouch, wild black hair like a tangled storm. Her skin was metallic gray and blue, cracked and dry like leather. Her face was almost skull-like, eyes clouded over, lips pulled into a forced smile. She wore a ragged fur cloak, revealing thin knees and elbows. Inside the cloak, I saw tongues, many tongues. "No," I whispered, heart hammering. She smiled slowly, and my breath caught in my throat. I backed into the garage, slammed the door, grabbing the biggest wrench I could find. Then, Through the silence, I heard a voice, soft, familiar. "Sunny Bear, are you there?" It was Lacey's voice, but it couldn't be her. "That's not you," I said. "It's me, baby. Open up." "No, fuck no. You're not thinking straight. Let's talk. Tell me what you wrote on the note." Silence. The wind howled outside. My heart threatened to burst. "Tell me what you wrote." No answer. Then the voice dropped, venomous and dark. "She chose the white one, you know." "What does that mean?" "You'll see, Sunny Bear. Just go away." "You'll never hear her again. No more whispers, no more songs." Rage surged through me. I flung open the side door, wrench in hand. Nothing. I burst into the house, broke the bathroom lock, and there she was, Lacey, on the floor. Her tongue swollen and white, eyes blank, not breathing. I cradled her, whispering, "No, no, no," over and over. I called 911, started CPR. Each breath tasted metallic and foul, but I kept going, desperate. After what felt like forever, the ambulance arrived. Lacey gasped for air. Our eyes met, and without words, I smiled. "Yes," I thought. "I love you too." She had to lose much of her tongue to an infection, and her body was weak. But she recovered. Today, Lacey's throat is fine, though she still can't speak. We found other ways, whiteboards on the fridge, gestures, smiles. We're healing, slowly but surely. And the strange rules? Turns out Lacey had been playing along too. She ordered a rare sunflower called the Tomskog, the kind kids used to eat seeds from. She broke a rule by smoking in the bathroom, and she sang the song. But the last rule, don't pick the white one. She fell for that trick. When I asked why, she just said, "That's the trick. They're all white." It's a story about love, resilience, and the strange ways we try to heal. And sometimes, it's about the whispers we choose to listen to and the shadows we face together. Hey, I want to share something from my childhood that stayed with me all these years. When I was about 9, I went through this really intense and scary phase where I kept seeing shadow people everywhere. Now, these weren't just fleeting glimpses or tricks of the light. They were these dark, shadowy silhouettes of people, completely black, like figures made of smoke, but with human shapes. They'd appear right there in my room, standing silently, almost like they were watching me. Sometimes they'd move around slowly, just drifting from one corner to another. It was unsettling. There was this one figure I remember especially well. A man wearing a hat. Every time he showed up, he would come close and hold out a box to me. I never knew what was inside, but he always tried to give it to me, holding it out in his shadowy hand. I never took it. The way he just stood there, silently offering something I couldn't see. It was creepy, but also confusing. And then there were these random shadow faces that popped up suddenly, right in front of my own face. They weren't grotesque or monstrous, just faces, made of pure darkness, appearing out of nowhere. Now, I wouldn't say they were terrifying in their appearance. It was more the fact that they were always there. It felt like they were constantly lurking around me, and that alone was terrifying for a little kid. I was scared out of my mind. My only defense was to pretend I didn't see them, to ignore them completely, and hope they'd lose interest and just vanish. But they didn't. They were everywhere, and ignoring them only made me feel more alone and helpless. Eventually, I got so scared that I stuck close to my mom whenever she was home. And when she wasn't, I'd hide under my blanket in my room, sometimes all day, just waiting for the night to pass. It felt like a never-ending nightmare, even though I can't really say exactly how long this went on. It just stretched on and on in my mind. I did try to tell my mom about what I was seeing, but at first, she didn't believe me. She thought I was maybe imagining things or trying to mess with her. But as time went on, it became clear to her that something was really going on. She came up with this idea that maybe these were spirits. And honestly, that scared me even more. Spirits? Watching me? What did they want from me? My mom got really fixated on the idea that I had this gift to see spirits. She found a woman online who claimed she could see the same things and help me. I was so desperate to be rid of these shadows. I just wanted them gone, no matter what. When I met this woman, she said she could do a ritual to stop me from seeing them anymore. I was terrified but willing to try anything. She had me lie down and then spoke these strange words. I barely remember them now, just that they sounded foreign and serious. After the ritual, the shadows actually stopped appearing. I was so relieved and happy. I forced myself to forget about them completely because the woman warned me not to think about the shadows anymore. She said if I did, it might be like sending an invitation for them to come back. But then, something else started. 2 large black dots appeared on the walls of my room. One was right above my bed, and the other was exactly opposite on the other side of the wall. They weren't mold or dirt, just these strange black stains that no one could explain. We painted over them, but every single time, the dots reappeared the next day. It freaked me out all over again. Because of that, my mom decided I should move to another room in the apartment. After I switched rooms, the dots stopped showing up. Years went by, and I tried to push all of it out of my mind. It was too frightening to deal with, and I wanted to forget it. But lately, I've been thinking about those shadows and the dots a lot. I still don't understand what happened. I'm an atheist and believe in science, so I've tried to find any logical explanation, but I can't find anything that fits. I even wonder if maybe I was sick in some way, but then what about the black spots on the wall? That part still puzzles me the most. Since the ritual, I haven't seen any shadows or faces again. It's like they vanished for good, but the memory and those strange black marks linger. I'm sharing this in the hope that maybe someone else has experienced something similar and can share what they went through. Or maybe you have some thoughts on what all of this could have been about. Because honestly, I'm still trying to make sense of it all. Hey, I want to share 2 stories with you that really got under my skin. One about a mysterious connection with my grandma, and another about an encounter with something truly terrifying in the woods. Sit with me for a bit, and I'll tell you everything, word for word, just like it happened. So first, about my grandma. I swear, she's still around. Maybe not in the way we usually think, but through music. Like she's speaking to me from somewhere only she knows. Yesterday, something unexplainable happened to me at work. I was sitting there, headphones on, just listening to a podcast. I wasn't even near my phone. It was tucked away in my bag. Out of nowhere, this song I instantly recognized started playing. Now, it wasn't part of the podcast or anything I had queued up. My phone had completely shut off the podcast and started playing a piece called River Flows in You by Yuruma. This song, it's the one we played at my grandma's funeral. Since that day, I haven't been able to listen to it without breaking down. So you can imagine my shock when I saw my phone open on Spotify, playing that very song. I immediately turned it off, switched back to the podcast, but then it happened again. The podcast would shut off, the song would come on, then back to the podcast. This happened 3 times in a row. I know it sounds crazy and maybe even fake, but I'm telling you, I'm not logged into Spotify anywhere else. No one else could be messing with my phone. The timing was uncanny. It was just a few days after the anniversary of her passing, 7 years ago now. The coincidence was too much. I wasn't scared though. Honestly, it felt like she was right there with me, sending me a message. Of course, it could be some weird tech glitch or someone nearby playing that song on their phone and it somehow synced with mine. But I don't know. It was one of the strangest moments of my life. Lately, I've been thinking about her a lot. This time of year always reminds me. And maybe, just maybe, she was thinking about me too, telling me she's still here. Now, the second story is darker. It's about an encounter I had back when I was 18, living in a small village in western Serbia. The place is surrounded by vast, dense forests, quiet and peaceful most of the time. But what happened that day turned everything upside down. At 18, I was pretty laid back, you know? The type who'd say, no way anything bad will ever happen to me. But I was wrong. We took a bus every day to school, about 20 kilometers to the nearest town. My younger brother and I, along with a few friends, made the trip together. Classes ran from 8 in the morning until around 6 in the evening, so by the time we were done, the town was ours to roam until the last bus at 10. It was almost summer and blisteringly hot. I wanted nothing more than to get out of town fast, but my little brother was in that goofy teenage phase, chasing after girls. I told him just to be back before the last bus, and off he went. By 9:55 p.m., I was waiting alone at the bus station, a strange unease creeping over me. I lit cigarette after cigarette, my mind racing and tangled. Then, I saw my brother strolling down the street with one of his friends. Relief washed over me, but that uneasy feeling didn't leave. We boarded the bus, but just as we were nearing home, it broke down. No big deal, I thought. We had about 3 kilometers to walk. Now picture this. On one side, the massive Drina River, dark and flowing. On the other, looming mountains. There was a single road, a railway track, and no street lamps. Pitch black. The only sounds were the river's murmur and the occasional car passing by. Our 2 friends turned on their phone flashlights, joking and chatting, trying to keep the mood light. But halfway through, everything changed. The river's sound and the cars faded away. Suddenly, all I could hear was their voices. The darkness seemed to thicken, swallowing the light, pressing down on me like a living thing. The hairs on my arms stood on end. I was gripped by pure, raw fear, the kind that claws at your insides when you know your life is in danger. My mind screamed, "Run! Move your legs! Just run!" But my body wouldn't obey. I was frozen. My eyes locked onto the railway tracks, and then I saw 2 glowing red bulbs speeding towards us. I prayed, please, please let it be a train. But as it passed, I glimpsed something far worse. A figure, black as night, as if wrapped in shadows, with eyes filled with pure malice. It stopped about 10 meters behind us. Our eyes met, and I swear, the smile it gave me was the most sinister thing I've ever seen. It shook me to my core. I yelled, voice cracking with terror, "Run! Don't look back! Just run!" But our friend turned around. The horror on his face was unmistakable. He was frozen, rooted to the spot. I had to act fast. I scooped him up like a child and ran, shouting, "Just run!" But then, that dark thing grabbed my backpack. I was paralyzed, 6'3", 220 pounds, and I couldn't move. It was like invisible chains held me. I heard my backpack rip, felt sharp pain on my back and arms, numbness spreading. I dropped my friend. I could sense my brother crying nearby. In that moment, a thought crossed my mind, bitter and raw. What a shitty way to go. I didn't even get laid yet. I wish Dad was here. He'd know what to do. Our father had passed not long before, and it hit us hard. But then, something miraculous happened. I felt a sudden warm tap on my shoulder. It was familiar, the way Dad used to touch me to calm me down. I knew it was him. I reached out, whispering, "Dad?" Tears streamed down my face. The pain vanished, the darkness lifted, the dread disappeared. I heard the river's gentle flow again, and I could move. I took a few steps towards my brother and then collapsed. My mind went blank. When I woke up in the hospital, my mom was crying, and my brother stood silently, his eyes empty, soulless. The reality of what had happened crashed over me, and I passed out again. Later, doctors asked questions. I felt sharp pain in my back when I tried to sit up. They said I only had minor scratches from a fall. I didn't believe them. I knew I'd felt real pain. I saw scratches on my arms too, but nothing that matched what I experienced. They wanted me to see a psychiatrist. I thought, great, they think I'm crazy or that I hurt myself. I didn't tell them about the shadowy figure. If I did, I knew I'd end up locked away. So I played dumb, told them I only remembered passing out. After that, nothing was the same. I talked with my brother about it, and we both saw what happened, but he went into denial, tried to block it out. He went back to chasing girls, carefree again. I was glad for that, but I could never forget that feeling, the warmth of Dad's hand saving me. Mentally, I was in a bad place after that, but our friend, he didn't recover. He stopped talking, stopped going to school, stopped eating. A month after that night, he took his own life. I carry that night with me every day, the fear, the darkness, the touch of my father's hand pulling me back. It's a story I don't tell often, but it's a part of who I am. Thanks for listening. Sometimes, sharing these things makes the shadows a little less frightening. Hey, I want to share a couple of stories that happened to me and a friend, both pretty unsettling, and honestly, they still give me chills when I think back on them. So, grab a seat, and let me tell you about the three-party house first. A few years ago, I moved into this apartment in a really quiet neighborhood. The place was perfect, honestly. Big bedroom, plenty of space, and this built-in desk that was ideal for the kind of work I do. On my very first day, I went to check the mailbox. Now, this part creeped me out a bit. There was this tiny slip of paper where my name would eventually go, but instead of a name, it said, deceased. I figured whoever lived there before had passed away. It was a little unsettling, sure, but I brushed it off, thinking, well, that's just life, right? Probably nothing to worry about. Months went by without a single incident. I was comfortable, settled in, and honestly, I wasn't thinking about that little piece of paper anymore. But then, suddenly, these dreams started coming to me. In these dreams, I was back in that same bedroom, but instead of being alone, there was this huge party going on. The room was packed with people I didn't know, strangers laughing and talking, the smell of cigarettes thick in the air, the clinking of glasses echoing all around. It felt so vivid. Every time I had this dream, what would wake me up was the smell of smoke. It was so strong and real that I'd actually wake up coughing a little. But even after waking, those party noises, the laughter, chatter, the glass clinks, would linger in my ears for a good 20 to 30 seconds, like the party was still going on somewhere just out of reach. Now, I've never really believed in ghosts or anything paranormal. I'm pretty grounded, and I try to be logical. But these dreams kept happening. Always the same scene, with the same people, the same smoky atmosphere. One night, in the dream, I actually gathered the courage to ask, "What do you want from me?" And then, one of the guys at the party turned around and looked right at me, and he said, "We need your help to communicate with our loved ones." I remember feeling a pure wave of fear and confusion. This wasn't just a dream anymore. It felt like they knew I was there. So I panicked and shouted, "I can't help you! Please stop showing me this over and over." The entire room went silent. Everyone stopped talking and stared at me with what I can only describe as disappointment. The same man said, "I'm very disappointed. I thought you'd help us. We won't bother you again." And just like that, the party faded away. The smoke smell disappeared, the noises vanished, and I never smelled smoke again or heard those party sounds when waking up. I never dreamed about that party again. Was it all just my mind playing tricks? Maybe. But here's the thing. This was also the same place where I had my only 3 experiences with night terrors. Before living there, I'd never had night terrors, and I haven't had them since. And those night terrors happened long after the dream started, months later to be exact. So, yeah, it was strange. Really strange. Now, the second story involves me and my best friend on a camping trip. He's kind of new to camping, so I've been showing him the ropes. We went to this backcountry campsite that I've been to maybe 24 times with different friends. I should mention, though, I've never stayed overnight there alone. We planned a quick 2-night trip. On the second night, we got lazy and didn't bother walking the garbage back to the car. We just left it out, planning to clean it up in the morning since I had to be out of the campground by 6:30 for work. We had separate tents right next to each other because of my early morning. Around 5 a.m., I suddenly jolted awake. I swear, I could hear footsteps walking past my tent, going from left to right. I strained my ears, trying to figure out if it was an animal, but it sounded too human. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it outside my tent. The moment the beam hit the ground, the footsteps stopped. I scanned the area, but I saw nothing. And strangely, there was no sound of anything running away. Just a heavy, eerie silence, broken only by the crickets chirping. I was pretty rattled, so I stayed awake, scrolling on my phone, refusing to go back to sleep. Then, about 10 minutes later, I heard something rummaging through the garbage. The trash was on the left side of my tent, but I hadn't heard any footsteps on that side before. Whatever it wasn't just casually skimming the garbage. It sounded like it was digging through it aggressively, like it was searching for something. I flashed my light in that direction and yelled out, "Hey!" But again, nothing. No running away, no rustling. Just silence. I stayed sitting up, flashlight steady, watching the area. I didn't want to freak my friend out, so I didn't say anything. Maybe it was just a skunk or a raccoon. But when daylight finally came, I jumped out and went straight to the garbage. I was ready to find a mess, but everything was exactly as we'd left it. Not a thing disturbed. I was frustrated and honestly starting to think my mind was messing with me. I just wanted to pack up and leave, and I figured I'd tell my friend about the strange noises before we went. As I was packing, I suddenly heard car doors opening and closing twice, about 40 to 50 yards away, behind a thick line of trees. My heart started pounding, fight or flight kicking in. At this point, I was convinced someone was messing with us, so I grabbed my axe and headed toward the cars. But as I rounded a corner, about 15 yards away, I saw my best friend walking toward me. I blurted out, "What the hell are you doing here?" He looked sleepy and confused. "I fell asleep in the car," he said. I asked, "Were you walking around the campsite an hour ago?" He shook his head. "No, I've been in the car the whole night." I told him, "You were still at the campfire when I called it a night. When did you go to the car?" He hesitated. "Honestly, I can't remember." And that's when it hit me. During those terrifying moments, I was completely alone at the campsite. Something else was out there with me, something I couldn't see or identify. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I told my friend, "I'll explain everything later, but for now, just pack up your stuff. We need to get out of here." We left soon after, and honestly, I haven't been back to that campsite alone since. So yeah, those are the 2 experiences that still haunt me a bit. Maybe you have an idea of what they could have been? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for listening. Hey, I want to share with you this really strange and honestly terrifying experience I had growing up. It's about the time when, well, I didn't just think my house was haunted. I realized maybe I'd somehow invited something in. Not just one thing, actually. There's more than one entity living with us, and while one is, I guess, friendly, the other is definitely not. Let me take you back to when it all started. It was around my 10th birthday, and it was the very first sleepover I ever had. I was so excited, buzzing with anticipation. Back then, I used to think all the weird things I noticed were just my imagination running wild. But as I got older, I started to understand those experiences were far more real than I wanted to admit. So, that night, my two friends, let's call them Faye and Fiona, were coming over, and we planned to sleep in the back room, the one above the garage. That room had always given me the creeps, even before I knew about the hauntings. I think part of it was because, as a kid, I was sometimes locked in there as a punishment, so it just felt wrong, cold, and lonely. As I was setting things up, laying out sleeping bags and pillows, I suddenly felt this cold touch on my shoulder. It wasn't like the usual touch of a hand. This was icy, like it was there, but also not there. My heart jumped. I looked up, thinking it was my dad, maybe teasing me, but no one was there. The room was empty. It was creepy, sure, but not entirely unexpected. So I told myself it was just my nerves and got back to preparing for the sleepover. The doorbell rang, and I hurried downstairs, heart still pounding just a little, to let my friends in. We climbed back up together, chatting and laughing, and for a while, everything seemed normal. But then, around midnight, things took a turn. Do you know that feeling when cold water trickles down your back? Now imagine that feeling, but sharper, colder, almost like tiny needles pricking your skin. Not wet, just icy and sharp. And then imagine that sensation spreading all over your body, enveloping you in this terrifying chill. That's what we all woke up to at exactly 12:05 a.m. The three of us sat bolt upright, frozen with fear. It was the first time anything like that had ever happened to me. Now I'm used to it, but back then, it was pure terror. Trying to shake off the fear, we decided to stay awake, keeping every light in the room blazing bright. But then came the weirdest part. The water dispenser in the bathroom, the one you use to wet your hands, suddenly turned on full blast all by itself. The water sprayed uncontrollably, creating a loud, startling noise in the silence of the night. None of us wanted to be the brave one to go in and turn it off. It was like something was messing with us, and we were completely frozen in place. You'd think that's as bad as it got, right? Oh no, it gets worse. Have you ever, as a kid, accidentally trapped a demon in your back room? Specifically, trapped it inside a giant stuffed dog? No? Just me? Okay, that's comforting to know. I'm trying to keep this light, but honestly, it's hard not to want to cry every time I think about it. A day or two later, being the curious and, frankly, dumb kid I was, I decided to check out that back room alone. No one else was home, but I brought my little Bible with me, clutching it tight like some kind of shield. Standing at the doorway, I hugged it to my chest, feeling scared but determined. The big stuffed dog sat propped up against the headboard of the bed, almost lifelike with its huge, glassy eyes staring emptily. Then, out of nowhere, it slumped forward onto its front. The only way that could have happened was if someone, or something, had pushed it. But I was 10 and naive, so I didn't think about that. I just kept looking. Then, suddenly, the doll flew across the room, crashing into the far wall. This thing was as tall as a small child. There was no way a breeze or anything could have pushed it. I screamed, the sound echoing through the house, and bolted out of the room. The door slammed shut behind me, and my heart was racing so fast I thought it might burst. I wanted to tell my parents, but I knew they wouldn't believe me. I had a habit of telling stories to get their attention, sometimes true, sometimes not, and so they usually just dismissed me. That moment sticks with me because it explains a lot that comes later. After that night, my dad started sleeping in the back room. Since my 10th birthday, my parents hadn't shared a bed, and this change was significant. For years, they didn't experience anything strange like I did, but one night, everything changed. My dad woke up with 3 deep scratches on his arm, the same arm that had been resting in the exact spot where that stuffed dog used to sit. We didn't have any pets, so no scratches from an animal. The scratches were too precise to be accidental, but my parents tried to brush it off, blaming it on work or something else. But I knew better. I was terrified. That night, I left my bedroom door slightly open because it was hot and we didn't have air conditioning. Looking back now, it's even more unsettling. A shadow appeared in the doorway. Not something that freaked me out too much at the time because I was used to weird things happening. But that same shadow would come back years later, haunting me in a different way. When I was 14, a man broke into my hotel room. Someone who looked just like that shadow, bald, with a beer belly, short, and bent over like an older man. It's so strange to think about now. Somehow, that thing in my childhood knew about someone I wouldn't meet until years later. I only realized what the man really looked like much later in life, but at that moment, all I could see was the shadowy figure from my back room, the one I'd tried so hard to ignore. So yeah, that's the story of how not to deal with a demon, or whatever it was, in your back room. If I learned anything, it's this. Curiosity might kill the cat, but it definitely terrifies a kid with a giant stuffed dog. And sometimes, the things we think are just nightmares are very, very real. Hey, I want to share a story that happened to me many years ago. So many that the details are still etched in my mind like it was just yesterday. I usually don't tell it because people tend to be skeptical, but I figured, why not? I promise it's worth hearing, and I'll take you through every little moment as it unfolded. Back when I was a kid, before the world got a little scarier, or maybe we just saw more of it, my family used to go on these long road trips down to Mexico. We'd drive for what felt like forever to reach the border, and part of our routine was to stop in Texas at this government building where we could exchange our American dollars for Mexican pesos. This place was right next to the Rio Grande River, you know, that big river that marks the border between the US and Mexico. The building was tucked under this huge, busy overpass, an expressway with cars zooming overhead. But the building itself was quiet and kind of off to the side. The night we stopped there, the moon was bright, but the air was cool and still, and the only lights came from the building and the faint glow of the moon reflecting on the river's surface. My parents asked my brother and me if we wanted to go inside with them to exchange money, but we were just kids, feeling a bit lazy and wanting to stay behind in the van. We said, "Nah, we're good," so they went ahead, leaving us alone in the parking lot. So now it was just me and my brother in this big van parked right next to the river, under the shadow of the expressway above. We had a cooler filled with sandwich stuff, bread, ham, all the essentials. So naturally, we started making ourselves some sandwiches. We were just sitting there, munching away, feeling comfortable and kind of silly about being left behind, when suddenly everything changed. It went dead silent. I mean, really silent. No sound of the river flowing, no cars passing overhead, Not even the usual faint hum of the city or the night insects. Just pure, eerie silence. It was so noticeable that it sent a little shiver down my spine. And then, cutting through the silence, came the crying. At first, I wasn't sure if I was imagining it. I glanced over at my brother and asked, "Hey, do you hear that? Is someone crying?" He stopped moving, and we both just listened, straining our ears. There it was again, a loud, heartbreaking wail of a woman crying, so clear and raw that it felt like it was right next to us. My brother's face went completely pale. He whispered, barely audible, "La Llorona." I blinked, confused. "What?" I asked. He was already scrambling out of the van and sprinting toward the building. I could tell he was terrified. I didn't hesitate. I jumped out and ran after him, but the feeling in my chest was heavy with dread, like something dark and awful was chasing me. The crying got louder, angrier, closer. It was as if it was right behind me, breathing down my neck. My brother made it inside the building first, slamming the door behind him. I got there a second later, but I paused right under one of those old-fashioned lamps hanging on the wall. I looked back at the parking lot, and that's when I saw it. There, lurking in the shadow of two big old Jeeps parked nearby, was something. It wasn't fully visible, but it was definitely watching me. The air around it was thick with pure hatred, like it was angry I was there, like I was an intruder who didn't belong. I froze for a moment, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, it turned away and disappeared into the darkness. Right after that, the world seemed to come back to life. The sounds of the river rushing, cars overhead, even the night critters, all of it returned in a rush. It was like someone had flipped a switch. I can't explain what I saw, if it was really La Llorona or something else, but I know one thing. I don't want to ever have another encounter like that. When I told my parents later, they just laughed it off, saying I must have been imagining things or dreaming. But I know what I experienced, and I'm sharing it with you now to see if maybe, just maybe, someone else has felt that same chilling presence by a river at night. For those who don't know, La Llorona is a Mexican urban legend about a woman who drowned her children long ago and is cursed to roam near bodies of water, crying and searching for their souls. Her wailing is said to be unmistakable, haunting and full of sorrow. So, that's my story. I hope you never hear that cry in the night, especially not alone by a river. Because some legends, they're better left alone. Hey there. I want to share some stories with you. Stories that have been with me for a long time. Some from my childhood, others from my adult life. They're a bit strange, a little unsettling, but they're a part of who I am, and maybe hearing them will make you feel less alone if you've ever experienced something similar. So, let me take you back to when I was about 8 years old. I grew up as an only child. Both my parents were police officers, always working crazy hours, which meant I was home alone a lot. I remember thinking, even back then, that good and evil weren't just ideas. They were real, both in the world and beyond it. One night, I was sleeping on the living room couch, the house quiet. The kind of quiet where you can almost hear your heartbeat. Suddenly, I woke up to this sharp snap sound, like a twig breaking. Then, a whisper. "Hey." I froze. Was I really hearing that? Another snap, louder this time, and the whisper again. "Hey." It felt like something was trying to get my attention, but I was too scared to respond. Another time, I was downstairs watching TV, and my dog suddenly looked up toward the balcony, like she saw something moving. Then, out of nowhere, a loud crash like glass shattering shook the entire house. I grabbed my phone, called my mom. I knew it wasn't a burglar, but I needed someone to talk to. Nightmares began to plague me. Vivid, terrifying dreams filled with demonic figures and pure evil. For nearly 3 years, every night around 2 a.m., I'd wake up from these nightmares, feeling sick, throwing up until dawn. My doctor eventually prescribed liquid Zantac, which helped ease the vomiting, but the fear of sleep never left me. I couldn't even sleep in the same room as my mom and her new husband anymore. The nightmares were relentless, each one more creative and horrifying than the last, making me feel utterly abandoned and alone. Yet, every morning, I had to go to school and act like everything was fine. My stepfather, Bill, had twin daughters from a previous marriage, and they stayed every other weekend. One night, I woke up to a loud bang on the ceiling. Their room was just above mine. The kitchen light was on, and when I opened the door to check, I saw my mom chopping carrots with her back to me. I asked if she heard the noise, and she turned around, her eyes vacant, her voice flat. "No, honey, I didn't hear anything." I knew it wasn't really her. I had to play along or risk who knows what happening. I headed upstairs, but the light switches were missing. Of course. At the top of the stairs, their bedroom light was on, the door cracked open. I heard giggling and the sound of plastic teacups crashing. They loved having little tea parties. Slowly, I peeked inside and saw a woman in a white dress sitting cross-legged, her back to me. She was giggling to herself, playing with the teacups, but when I said, "Hello?" she ignored me. I tried again, louder, but still no response. Then I lost my patience. I raised my foot and pushed her gently, shouting, "I said hello!" She stopped giggling, stood up without using her hands, and walked backward toward me. I was frozen, but then she spun around in a blink and grinned. "Do you want to play with me?" Her face was a sickly pale green, torn as if cut by blades. Ice shot through my veins as I gasped for air, feeling her fingers grip my neck. I bolted down the stairs, barely able to breathe. Bang! I woke up to the same noise that started the nightmare. It sounded like a heavy bowling ball crashing to the floor. I was alone, covered by blankets until sunrise. This was my childhood. Nights filled with terror, days pretending nothing was wrong. I spent as much time as I could at friends' houses, loving sleepovers because they felt safe. Now I'm 25, and though the nightmares have faded, the memories remain. Sometimes I dream of overcoming the dark spirits, bursting with light and emotion. Those dreams feel like victories. This is the first time I've shared all this, but maybe my lesson was to understand what evil is and what it isn't. Now, let me tell you about something that happened to a friend of mine at work recently. He works in an office with a small men's bathroom down the hall. Just one stall, one urinal, and a sink. The layout is simple. You walk in, turn left, and the stall is right ahead, with the sink on the left and the urinal between them. He went to use the urinal one day and noticed the stall door was slightly open, but no one was inside. After finishing, he went to wash his hands and caught movement out of the corner of his eye. The stall door was slowly closing all by itself, from fully open to nearly shut. He thought maybe his movement had caused it, but when he entered, the door was already almost closed. So, during the time he was at the urinal, the door somehow swung fully open and then closed itself again, without anyone around. The main door to the bathroom makes a loud, distinct sound when it opens and closes, so he knew no one had slipped in or out unnoticed. There are no vents or fans to cause the door to move, and for it to swing both ways would defy gravity. He told a coworker about it, who confirmed that he'd experienced similar strange things during night shifts, like footsteps in empty hallways. No one knows what's going on, but my friend finds it fascinating, even if it's a little creepy. Speaking of strange sounds, my family's property has 2 houses side by side, surrounded by woods with no neighbors in sight. The first time I heard it was late December 2020. My girlfriend and I came home around 11:30 p.m., walking through the snowy yard, our footsteps crunching in the cold. Halfway to the door, we stopped, both hearing the same thing, a rhythmic whistle coming from the woods nearby. It wasn't a friendly whistle, more like a haunting tune that lasted a few seconds. We shrugged it off as wildlife, trying to calm ourselves. A couple of months later, the whistles returned, this time one clear note coming from the basement while we were doing homework late at night. We sat in silence for minutes before pretending it hadn't happened. I haven't heard it since, but my brothers claim to have heard similar whistles at the other house. Just last week, I was alone at 2:30 a.m. when the same single whistle echoed from the living room. It's strange, especially since both my grandparents passed away in that house, though I don't remember them whistling much. Now, here's a story from a hotel worker I know, working the night shift at a historic hotel in Virginia Beach, famous for its ghost stories. On the second floor, while doing turn-down service in room 206, she knocked 3 times, but no one answered. She scanned her keycard, opened the door, and felt a gentle pull, as if someone was holding the door open for her. An eerie sensation settled over her, but she pressed on. She called out, "Hello?" But the room was empty. No luggage, no sign of a guest. She placed cookies on a desk under a lamp and switched it on. Suddenly, the lamp flickered wildly. She joked, "Are you messing with me tonight?" The lamp kept flickering as she moved to close the blinds, when a drawer slowly slid open on its own. A heavy dread washed over her, but she assured the unseen presence she was just doing her job. After a moment, the feeling lifted a bit, though the lamp still flickered. She turned on the TV, and it showed a trailer for the movie Nope, fittingly creepy. She finished quickly and left, shaken but fascinated. This was her first real personal encounter with the hotel's haunted reputation. Let me share another experience from a healthcare worker I know, Rob, who had a chilling encounter during a night shift. Early on, he had to clean 2 rooms of recently deceased residents. One room felt unsettling even before it was vacant, a darkness that made his skin crawl. After cleaning, as he stepped into the long corridor, he heard a male voice call his first name clearly. Odd, since only his family used his full name. He looked up and saw a shadowy, wispy figure standing there. Shocked, he swore and turned away. When he looked back, the figure was gone. He checked with a colleague who was asleep and hadn't called his name. The experience left him unnerved, but not threatened. Speaking of nursing homes, another friend who worked night shifts in elder care told me about a patient who claimed to see the ghost of a tall, broad ex-army officer, a Queen's Guard, who had passed away but whose shoes were still kept in the office. One night, the new patient called for help, terrified, saying a huge man appeared in the room and bathroom, asking for his shoes back before walking past the caregiver. Even someone as seasoned as my friend was shaken by this encounter. Now, I want to tell you a story from a woman who moved as a child from the city to a small town, where her family lived in a double-wide trailer at the end of a quiet road. On the property was an old, dilapidated shack that she would sometimes explore, despite the spider webs and yellow jacket nests. Once, while talking to her mom in the bathroom, they smelled sweet smoke, but no one smoked, and there were no guests. Months later, while playing near the shed with the dog stopped and froze. She saw an elderly man in a gray suit, with a thick mustache and bowler hat, smoking a pipe, walking toward the trailer. When she tried to speak, she noticed she could see right through his legs. The man tipped his hat in greeting before fading into mist. Though she only saw him once, she sometimes smelled his pipe smoke, feeling comforted by his presence. Lastly, there's a story from a 45-year-old Belgian man of Moroccan descent who spent summers at his relative's remote farm near Tangier. The farm had no electricity, no paved roads, just wells, kerosene lamps, and dirt everywhere. He was the only child around and was kept protected and isolated by his family because he looked different. Blonde hair, pale skin, Western clothes, which made them fear the evil eye, a curse from jealous glares. One morning, at age 7, while helping his grandmother with the cows in the pastures before dawn, he got separated from her. Suddenly, he saw a creature, human-like but not. Its face shifted between male and female, with pointy ears, sharp ivory-like teeth, small horns, backward goat legs ending in hooves, and fur-like hair. It smiled a terrifying smile. He screamed and ran, but the creature appeared at every turn, laughing and feeding off his fear. His grandmother eventually found him, calm but unable to see the creature herself. He was sick for days afterward, with bizarre dreams that confused his senses. His family was deeply worried, more than usual, and local healers were called, using traditional potions and prayers to help him recover. Though the illness faded as he grew older, the memory of that terrifying encounter stayed with him. So these stories, from childhood nightmares to haunted bathrooms, mysterious whistles in the night, ghostly figures in hospital halls, and ancient spirits on distant farms, they weave together a tapestry of fear and wonder. They remind us that sometimes the unseen world brushes against ours, shaping our experiences and teaching us about courage, mystery, and the unknown. I hope sharing these brings you some comfort, or maybe just a chill down your spine. Thanks for listening. I want to start by saying that I've never really thought of myself as a superstitious person. I'm not someone who jumps straight to ghosts or spirits or hauntings when something strange happens. I try to stay grounded, but I also try to stay humble. I know there are people who understand things I don't, and when they speak from experience, I listen. This happened during a community gathering I helped organize. We had about 50 people coming together to mark Indigenous Peoples Day, and we had workshops planned throughout the afternoon. There was food, conversation, teaching, and one of the men there was helping people make small medicine bundles. He was also offering cedar and sage brushings for anyone who wanted one. When we arrived that morning to set everything up, we found something sitting outside the community hall. It was a shallow wooden box, left right under the windows by the side entrance. Inside it was a white, fluffy cat. At first, everybody just froze. Then we realized it wasn't a real living cat, and not exactly a recently deceased one either. It was taxidermy. Poorly done taxidermy too. You could see the stitching if you looked closely, and it was oddly light when the box was moved. It didn't feel right in any sense of the word, and that was unsettling enough on its own. Our community is not a place someone just casually passes through. We're about 40 minutes down a rough gravel road from the nearest town. There are only a few dozen people who live out there, and everybody knows everybody. So either someone drove all the way out specifically to leave that box, or someone from our own community put it there. Neither answer felt good. Nobody really knew what to do with it, and since I was the main facilitator that day, I felt responsible for making a decision. I didn't want it sitting outside the hall while people were arriving, especially not for a gathering meant to be respectful and welcoming. So I put the whole box into a black garbage bag and placed it in the back of my truck. The plan was to deal with it properly later, maybe by burning it in a small fire away from the hall. I didn't feel right just throwing it into a bin. I locked my truck afterward. I'm sure of that. My purse was inside, so I made sure the windows were up, the doors were locked, everything was secure. My key fob was in my jacket pocket the whole time. A few hours later, I went back out to grab something from my purse. Every single window on my truck was rolled all the way down. All of them. The doors were unlocked too. I just stood there for a second, trying to make sense of it. My purse was still sitting inside, untouched. Nothing seemed stolen, and honestly, theft would have surprised me anyway. It's a small place and we look out for each other. But my truck has never done anything like that before. My key fob doesn't even have a feature that opens all the windows remotely. I hadn't bumped anything. Nobody else had the keys. I walked around to the driver's side, got in, pressed the start button just enough to turn the power on, and rolled the windows back up. Then I shut everything off and tried to lock the truck again. It wouldn't lock. I tried again. Nothing. I tried a few more times, standing there with this strange, cold feeling crawling up the back of my neck. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't like a movie. It was worse than that, honestly, because it was quiet and ordinary and completely wrong. So I went back inside and spoke to the man who had been doing the medicine bundles and brushings. I told him what happened, and he listened very calmly. He didn't make me feel silly. He didn't jump to conclusions either. We decided the cat needed to be moved out of my truck right away. One of the facility workers was already taking garbage out to the larger bins, so he took the black bag with him. After that, the man came out with sage and an eagle feather and gently brushed the inside of my truck. He took his time. He moved through it with care, and then he did the same for me. And I'll be honest with you, I felt embarrassed at first for needing that. But by the time he finished, I felt lighter. Not perfectly fine, but steadier. Then I closed the truck doors and tried the lock again. It worked immediately. I still don't know what happened. Maybe someone thought they were being funny. Maybe the truck malfunctioned in some way I'll never be able to explain. Maybe the timing of everything made it feel bigger than it was. But I know how I felt that day. I know how everyone reacted when we found that box. And I know my truck wouldn't lock until that thing was gone and the brushing was finished. I do wish someone had taken a picture of the cat, just so I could look back and prove to myself how strange it really was. But in the moment, none of us were thinking like that. We were just trying to understand why someone would leave it there and what we were supposed to do next. I'm still not someone who claims to know exactly what was going on, but I can tell you this. After the sage, the whole feeling changed. I'm not usually the kind of person who points at every strange thing and says, "That must be paranormal." I'm cautious about that. I like to stay grounded, but I also believe just enough to admit when something starts feeling off. And lately, something has felt very off. For almost 2 weeks now, I've had one weird, frustrating thing happen after another. None of it has been outright dangerous, thank goodness, but every incident has landed directly on me somehow. It doesn't seem to spill over onto the people around me. It's like I'm the one standing under the little storm cloud. At first, I thought it was carelessness. Then I thought it was bad luck. But after so many days in a row, with each day bringing some new problem, I've started wondering if I've been jinxed or followed by some kind of strange energy. The first big thing was a document I'd been working on for months. It corrupted out of nowhere, and I lost nearly half a year of notes that were really important for my work. So the next day, I sat down and tried to rebuild as much of it as I could from memory. I spent almost the entire day doing that. Then the file didn't save properly. I only found out the morning after, so I lost the replacement too. Then I moved some files from one computer to an external drive, and for a while it looked like the transfer had overwritten something important. Thankfully, after the first disaster, I had started making backups in 2 different places, so that one ended up being only a scare. But still, my nerves were already fried. Another day, someone I hadn't spoken to in years joined the same online group as me not long after I did. We didn't plan it, and neither of us was trying to bother the other. We just happened to like the same niche hobby. It has been okay since then, but at first, I felt my whole body tense up. Then I left my glasses inside a bag while I was out in the summer heat. I almost never do that, but that day I'd worn them out and didn't want to go all the way back home. The lenses got damaged from the heat, and replacing them cost far more than I wanted to spend. Around the same time, I noticed that a tiny mole on my nose looked larger than it had before. Maybe it was nothing, but after everything else, even small things started feeling like part of the pattern. Then yesterday, I got strangely overwhelmed by what should have been mild afternoon sun and warm pool water. I wasn't out there for long, but for a few hours afterward, I felt almost giddy and disoriented, like I was drunk without drinking. After that, I crashed hard and felt sick and exhausted. And today, I poured cold water into a room temperature glass. I was holding it for just a few minutes when the glass suddenly cracked apart in my hand. The water didn't ruin anything, and I didn't get hurt, but it scared me badly. What makes it stranger is that I keep seeing little themes. There have been several problems with data and files, several things involving glass, several things involving heat or sunlight, even though I've never been unusually sensitive to the sun before. Maybe it means nothing. Maybe my brain is connecting dots because I'm stressed. But I can't ignore how concentrated it all feels. Looking back, I can even see smaller oddities from the weeks before this started happening daily. Software suddenly stopped working. An old computer finally died. A file disappeared from a drive for no clear reason. Again, mostly technology and data. I'm just not used to this many issues piling up so close together. I don't mess around with the paranormal directly. I read about spirits and spiritual beliefs for creative projects, but I keep it at a distance. I'm interested, but skeptical. I don't try to summon anything, contact anything, or invite anything in. Still, at this point, I'm starting to feel like I may need to cleanse myself and my space somehow. I don't have access to spiritual services, and honestly, I don't feel comfortable trusting strangers with something like that. But I would be willing to do something simple and sincere at home, just to clear the air and feel steady again. I can't think of anyone I've hurt or anything I've done that would deserve some kind of karmic payback. Mostly, I've just been at home, taking care of my cat, working on my small projects, and trying to live quietly. So I guess I'm asking this because I don't know what else to do. Has anyone else gone through a stretch like this, where the little accidents start to feel targeted? And if so, what helped you return to a calmer, less chaotic everyday life? I'm 28 now, and I grew up in San Diego. There was this old family house in southeast San Diego, not far from Daisy Avenue. I won't say the exact house, but it had been in my family for a long, long time. My mom inherited it, and by the time we moved out, when I was around 12, that place already felt like it had been holding on to stories for years. The first thing I remember happened when I was about 5. I was lying in bed in the second biggest bedroom, watching TV, even though I was supposed to be asleep. Then, all of a sudden, I felt the blanket shift near my feet. And I don't mean I imagined it. I saw it move. I pulled the blanket off so fast, but there was nothing there. No person, no pet, nothing that could explain it. I was little, so I tried to forget about it, but that house never really let me forget. About a year later, my grandma and my uncle started coming over more often because of some family trouble at their place. My uncle was only about a year older than me, so he felt more like a cousin or a brother than an adult. My grandma eventually went back home, but he wanted to stay with us a little longer. He did not stay long. One night, my older sister, my uncle, and I were sleeping on the living room floor. I've never been a heavy sleeper, so when I heard soft laughing, I woke up right away. My sister heard it too. We just looked at each other, wide awake, not saying anything at first. Then we heard it again. A little girl's laugh. We woke my uncle up, And that's when we saw her. At the bottom of the stairs, near the front door, there was this small figure. She wasn't a black shadow. She was pale, almost glowing, like a faded white-blue color. She looked like a little girl with 2 pigtails, and she seemed to be holding something in one hand. She was laughing softly as she walked up the stairs. She got to the top, paused near the window, and then kept walking toward the second biggest bedroom, which had become my older sister's room by then. I had moved downstairs near the master bedroom with my baby sister. The next morning, we told my mom everything. It was the weekend, so she was home. When she saw how scared my uncle was, she took him home immediately. After she came back, she started checking around the house. My stepdad was at work, so it was just my mom, my 2 sisters, and me. A little while later, my mom called us upstairs. She was standing on the toilet in the bathroom, tapping a rhythm on the ceiling. Then something tapped the exact same rhythm back. I still remember the feeling in my stomach when it happened. When my stepdad got home, he checked the attic and said it was probably birds. Honestly, that answer felt way too boring for what we had just heard. Later on, when my baby sister turned 1, we had a party at the house. The adults were outside enjoying themselves, the kids were running around, and eventually, the sky started getting darker. My older sister and I were in the backyard playing on the swings when we both looked up at her bedroom window. There was someone standing there. A figure was looking down at us from inside the room. We ran into the house and straight upstairs, but when we got to the bedroom, no one was there. Nothing was out of place. We walked over to the window and looked outside. There was no wind. It was a calm evening, good weather, completely still. But one of the swings was moving by itself. Just one. We went back outside, and by the time we got there, both swings were still again. No movement at all. Years passed, and when my baby sister was about 5, something happened that I still think about. I had stood in my older sister's window before, literally standing right there, and nothing happened to me. But one day, my baby sister got up there and fell from the 2nd story. She fell head first. Her head landed on the grass, and her body landed partly on the concrete. She was unconscious, and it was terrifying. But somehow, she survived. She walked out of the hospital with a small limp and a scratch. I still say thank God for that. When I was 12, we moved to Serra Mesa. I thought maybe everything would stop once we left that house. It didn't. Only a few days after moving in, I was home alone. My mom was out, and both of my sisters were with their own families. That night, I suddenly felt like something was watching me. It wasn't just a normal creepy feeling. It sent chills through my whole body, and it felt heavy, like the air inside the house had changed. I checked to see if my friend was awake. She lived a couple doors down, and thankfully she answered. She came over and sat outside with me until my mom got back around 4 in the morning. I did tell my mom, but she didn't really take it seriously. The feeling had stopped maybe an hour before she got home, but I refused to go back inside until she was there. Sometime after that, my mom and I were sharing a room. Everyone was asleep when I woke up to these strange sounds. I opened my eyes, and there she was, the same little girl. But this time, she was on the ceiling. It was only her head. I could see the pigtails, her eyes, and her mouth moving, but she wasn't speaking English. She wasn't speaking Spanish either. I couldn't understand her at all. I tried to move, but I couldn't. I tried to talk, but nothing came out. Eventually, my mom noticed something was wrong and helped me snap out of it. When she asked me what happened, I told her everything. The next day, one of my older sister's friends came over. She was the kind of person who said she could sense things, but I hadn't told her the details. She walked out of my sister's room while she was on the phone, and I was in the living room watching TV. At one point, I noticed she had stopped talking. I turned around, and she was frozen in place before she reached the hallway. I asked her what was wrong. She said, "Has anything been happening to you?" I told her a little, but I never described the little girl. Then she said, "I think I'm seeing the little girl that's been following you. She has pigtails, right? And she's holding a toy bear or something?" That shook me, because yes, that was her. Pale, small, pigtails, always holding something in her hand. My sister's friend said, "She looks light blue right now. I think you helped her enough, and she's ready to leave." And listen, as touching as that sounded, I was ready for her to go. To this day, I still think she helped my baby sister when she fell from that window. I also believe something happened to that little girl long before we ever lived there. Maybe before the house looked the way it does now. Maybe she was stuck. Maybe she attached herself to me because I was young, and maybe my sister and I reminded her what it felt like to be a child. She never really scared me until that night on the ceiling. My mom had her own stories from that house too, from before my sisters and I were born, back when she lived there with her parents. She said the chandelier would make this loud noise and start moving by itself, but if they hit it with their hands, it never made the same sound. She also told us she once saw a dark, man-shaped figure standing in her doorway at night. She didn't talk about that part much, but I could tell it stayed with her. Even now, I still feel things around me sometimes. I don't really see things anymore, or maybe I've just trained myself to act like I don't. But I still wonder about that little girl. I wonder who she was. I wonder what language she was speaking. And I wonder if, back when that part of San Diego was still dirt roads and open land, she lived there before any of us ever called that place home. This happened to me back in 2002 in Cameroon, right in the heart of Central Africa. I'm in my 40s now, but at the time, I was only 20 years old. I was studying psychology at university in England, and I was very much the kind of person who believed everything strange could be explained by the brain. Ghosts, spirits, divine messages, all of that felt to me like something people reached for when they didn't understand what was really happening. I didn't believe in religion then. I still don't, not in the organized sense, though these days I do believe in something greater than us. A higher power maybe. Something beyond what I used to allow myself to consider. Anyway, I had gone to Cameroon for about a month because my uncle had settled there after spending most of his working life with a large petroleum company in Africa. He was getting married to a Nigerian woman, and I had been sent as the family representative, really. I was there to welcome her properly and to be part of the celebration. I had been to South Africa before, but never to Central Africa. And honestly, that trip gave me more strange stories than I could ever fit into one sitting. But this one is the one I still think about. This is the one I still can't fully file away. About halfway through the trip, we were preparing to travel north toward the savannah, where we'd be camping for nearly 2 weeks. Before heading out, we stopped in Yaoundé for one night to gather supplies and enjoy one last bit of comfort before the long drive and the rougher conditions ahead. So we stayed at a large hotel in the city. That night, I went to bed late. I remember feeling uneasy, not terrified, but restless. I was worried about the journey into the north, and looking back, I had reason to be. But eventually, I drifted off. Then, at some point in the night, I began dreaming that I couldn't breathe. I was gasping, struggling, trying to pull air into my lungs. The feeling was so strong that it woke me up. And when I opened my eyes, I still couldn't breathe. I was fully awake within a second, completely alert, panicked. And right there, leaning over me, maybe 8 or 10 inches from my face, was an old African woman. She wasn't solid. She was made of this white mist, almost like smoke, but she was unbelievably clear. I could see every detail of her face. Her hair was gray-white, dry, tangled, and thin in places, though she still had quite a lot of it. Her forehead was deeply wrinkled. Her skin looked pale and ashen, but her features were unmistakably African. She was terribly thin, frail really, and her face looked too large for her body. Below her torso, she just faded away into smoke. She had no legs. Her eyes were white, no pupils. But somehow, even without pupils, I knew she was looking straight at me, not blankly, not peacefully. She looked determined, forceful, and there was this same white mist going from my mouth into hers. That is the part I have never been able to forget. It felt as though she was drawing something out of me. Breath, energy, life, I don't know. But I understood, instantly and completely, that something was happening to me. I tried to move, but I couldn't. I was fighting with everything in me, but my body wouldn't respond properly. I was terrified of her, but I was also terrified because some part of me seemed to know exactly what she was doing. It only lasted a few seconds, though it felt much longer. Then she stopped. I had the strongest impression that she was annoyed with me, almost irritated that I was resisting. She moved away from my face and glided toward the foot of the bed. I kept my eyes locked on her the whole time while I dragged in these huge, panicked breaths. As soon as I could move enough, I reached over and switched on the bedside lamp, and I watched her disappear. Not vanish all at once, evaporate. The light came from my right side, and I swear I saw the last pale edge of her form fading on my left, like smoke thinning out in the corner of my eye. The whole thing, from waking up to turning on the light, probably lasted 10 seconds, maybe 11. But I did not sleep again that night. The next morning, I went up to breakfast on the hotel rooftop with my uncle and his new wife. I must have looked dreadful because my uncle immediately asked what was wrong with me. So I told them. He laughed, not kindly either. He called over a waiter and made some remark about wanting a refund because I had apparently been attacked by a ghost in my room. I still don't know if he was joking or trying to embarrass me, but the waiter didn't laugh. He just shrugged and said the people who built the hotel had been warned. He said the land had been a burial place, sacred ground. He said the hotel was cursed and that what I described did not surprise him at all. Then he walked away. The table went silent. I was stunned because for the first time, I wondered whether what I saw had actually been something outside of me. My uncle was stunned because the waiter had dismissed him so plainly, and my aunt, who was deeply religious, looked as if she didn't know what to do with the information at all. Now, here is the thing. When you travel to that part of Africa, you take malaria medication, and certain malaria medications can, rarely, cause hallucinations. So for years, that was the explanation I used. I told myself it was the tablets, just the tablets, nothing more. But the part that bothers me is this. I was there for nearly a month, and that was the only time anything like that happened. It happened in one specific hotel, in one specific room, on one specific night, and only afterward was I told the place had been built on a burial ground. Maybe the medication triggered it. Maybe it was sleep paralysis. Maybe my brain created the whole thing. But it didn't feel like a dream. It didn't even feel like a hallucination. It felt physical. It crossed from sleep into waking. I woke up unable to breathe, and whatever I saw was still there. For 20 years, I pushed it away. I called it science and moved on. But as I've gotten older, and honestly as my understanding of life and science has become a little less rigid, I've become more open to the possibility that I don't know everything. And there's one more thing I should tell you. 2 years later, I went to an adult baptism for a friend in South London. I arrived late and sat near the back of the church. I didn't know many people there. Afterward, an older couple approached me. They were South African, white, probably in their 50s. The husband wouldn't look directly at me. He leaned toward his wife and whispered something. She said to me, "My husband speaks to God. He knew when you came into the church that we had to find you. He says God has a message for you." Then he whispered again. She repeated, "He says, don't worry. He is with you now, just as he was when you were at ping pong. He doesn't know what that means, but he says it will mean something to you." And it did. The Tuesday before, I had been at a restaurant in North London called Ping Pong with my brother's godfather. This couple did not know me. They had never met me. They had no reason to know where I had been, when I had been there, or who I had been with. They didn't ask for money. They didn't try to recruit me. They gave me the message and walked away. At the time, I explained that away too. I told myself it was psychology, suggestion, a coincidence, maybe some kind of emotional release I badly needed. But from that day forward, something changed. The heaviness I had been carrying since Cameroon began to lift. I changed my life. I moved countries. And the years that followed were strange, beautiful, difficult, and extraordinary in ways I could never have planned. So I still don't know what happened in that hotel room. Maybe it was medicine. Maybe it was the brain. Maybe it was something older than both. But I know what I saw. And I know that for 10 seconds in Yaoundé, I was not alone in that room. I left school in 2000 and pretty much went straight into work. My first proper job was with a small family firm that repaired old Victorian power press machines. At the beginning, I felt lucky to be there. It was steady work, hands-on, and I was learning something real. But after a while, the man who owned the place started treating me badly. It turned into bullying, little digs here and there, then bigger ones, until one day I just thought, no, I'm not living like this. So I applied for an apprenticeship with a company that built armored vehicles and ambulances. They wanted me, but because it was July, they couldn't take me on until September. I had to enroll in college first. That left me with a whole summer and not much to do. Then a family friend offered me some laboring work over in Barmouth, a little seaside village in Wales. I thought, why not? I could earn a bit of money, get away from my mom's house for a while, and have a change of scenery. We drove over on a Monday morning and got straight to work. The job was converting an old shop front window into a new living room for someone's holiday home. Honestly, it was lovely. We'd start around 8 in the morning and finish by 4 in the afternoon, and the rest of the day was mine. In the evenings, people encouraged me to go out, enjoy myself, have a drink, meet people. So I did. I went to the local bars, and there was a little nightclub. I think it was called Barry's. That's where I met Leah. And Leah became the first girl I ever properly fell in love with. For the next 6 weeks, we were inseparable. We met new friends, went drinking, stayed out too late, kissed too much, laughed at everything, and did all the things you do when you're young and convinced summer is going to last forever. But of course, summer doesn't last forever. The building work started coming to an end, and I thought Leah would become one of those memories you keep tucked away, almost like something you dreamed. But it didn't turn out like that. She lived in Birmingham, and I lived in Walsall, so we kept seeing each other. By October, we were together all the time. Her parents seemed to like me too, and one day her mum invited me back to Barmouth to stay at their cottage. I said yes, straight away. A week or so later, on a Friday evening, we headed back to Wales. I'd never seen the cottage before, but Leah had told me it was old. Really old. She said the rafters had been built by a retired sea captain who used timber from his old boat when he made the place. I remember thinking that sounded beautiful. What she didn't tell me was how isolated it was. As we came into Barmouth, we turned off into a small car park, opened a gate, and started up this narrow road along the hillside. If you've ever driven in Wales, you'll know the kind of road I mean. One track, steep, with just enough room to make you question your life choices. Eventually, we passed a farm. Leah said her mom was friendly with the farmer and had known him for years. She made a joke that she was sure something was going on between them. Then we carried on higher. After a while, the road turned into more of a dirt track. And then, finally, we reached the cottage. I can still picture it clearly. It looked like something from another century. Bowed old walls, a sagging roof, that kind of weathered beauty you can't fake. There were hills all around, trees everywhere, and a little stream running beside it where you had to collect water. It was one of the most peaceful places I'd ever seen. That first night, after we got settled, Leah's mom told us she was going into Chester with the farmer for an auction. She told us to enjoy ourselves, and off she went. So we decided to walk down into town and meet some of the friends we'd made over the summer. The nights were drawing in by then, getting cold and dark early, so we planned to have a quick drink and get back before it was properly dark. That was the plan, anyway. A few drinks turned into a few hours. We were all having a good time, and eventually someone suggested we all head back up to the cottage together. There were a few of us, and we figured the walk would be fine. It would take about half an hour, but with friends, a drink in hand, and a cigarette or two, it didn't feel like a big deal. We started up the hill from the car park. After a little while, one of the lads looked back and said, "Wonder where he's going." We all turned around. Far behind us, down the track, there was a black figure walking in our direction. At first, it didn't seem strange. It could have been a dog walker or a hiker, someone local maybe, so we ignored it. But 5 minutes later, someone looked back again and said, "He's caught up fast." And he had. This person was much closer now. A man, or what looked like a man, dressed all in black with long hair. He was moving quickly, really powering up the hill behind us. The mood changed then. We picked up our pace. Nobody wanted to say they were scared, but everyone felt it. He looked wrong somehow. Not in a way you could easily explain, just wrong. Then, suddenly, he disappeared. That should have made us feel better, but it didn't. All the way up that hillside, we felt like we were being followed, watched. To our left was a drop, and to our right it was steep ground, rocks, boulders, shrubs, darkness creeping in between everything. There was this horrible feeling in my chest, that little pinch of dread before your mind has even worked out what it's afraid of. By the time we saw the cottage, we practically scrambled inside. We shut the door and bolted it. For a moment, we all just looked at each other. One of the lads said, "I think he was going to have us." But then, because you do this when you're scared, we started trying to explain it away. He was probably a hiker, maybe a local. Maybe we'd imagined it because it was getting dark. By then, night had properly fallen, and if you've ever been out in rural Wales at night, you'll know it's a different kind of dark. Not like street-lit town darkness. This was thick, heavy, absolute black. There was no TV in the cottage, and this was before phones and internet were anything useful. So someone suggested we play Monopoly and forget about it. So we did. It must have been around 10 o'clock when one of the group got up to make a drink. A few seconds later, they called us into the kitchen. Their voice had changed. We went in, and through the window, we saw him. The figure was standing near a tree, maybe 4 meters from the cottage, looking right at the place. Nobody laughed then. We closed the curtains fast and checked every window. We grabbed whatever we could use as weapons, fire pokers, bits of wood, anything we could find. Then we all sat together in the middle of the lounge, quiet as anything. That's when the scratching started. At first it was just little taps on the windows, then scratching, then something moving the furniture outside. We could hear it, circling the cottage. Every sound was close. The windows were thin, and the whole place seemed to carry noise through it. We sat there, huddled together, barely breathing, listening to whatever was outside move around us. Then it went quiet. For about 5 minutes, there was nothing. Someone whispered, "Has he gone?" And then came the bang on the front door. It was huge. Not a knock, a proper slam, like something throwing itself against the door. Again and again and again. It went on for what felt like forever, maybe 20 minutes, maybe less. Fear stretches time out until it becomes something else. Then it stopped. We heard it moving around the cottage again, trying the windows. But by then, it didn't sound like a person anymore. I don't know how else to describe it. It sounded animal-like. A pig crossed with a dog, maybe. Wet, heavy breathing, snuffling, scraping. Then the banging started again, and then, suddenly, silence. We didn't sleep that night. None of us did. We sat there until daylight came through the windows. In the morning, we heard voices outside. Leah's mom and the farmer had come back. We ran out, still shaken, trying to explain what had happened. But there was nothing to show them. No scratches on the door, no broken windows, no marks. They laughed at us. The farmer just looked at us and said, "Was it a full moon?" Then he drove away. Later, as we walked down the trail to say goodbye to our friends, we saw a sheep nearby. It was dead, and it looked like it had been attacked. Its insides were hanging out. The farmer said it was probably a fox. Maybe it was. I never went back to that cottage. Not because I decided never to, exactly. Life just moved on. Leah went off to university, and I ended up joining the army. We broke up eventually. But I still think about that night. I think about the figure on the hill, the scratching at the windows, the sound at the door, the way the farmer asked about the moon, like he already knew something we didn't. And honestly, even after all these years, I still don't know what followed us up to that cottage. I want to tell you about something that happened a few years ago, because it still drifts back into my mind sometimes. Back then, I was working as a mail carrier. Not for very long, honestly. It was one of those jobs I thought I could handle, but my body had other opinions. I was getting a little too worn around the edges for all that walking, lifting, and pushing through the day no matter what. This was in the United States, in a downtown area where I was delivering mail. I had moved a long, long way from the place where I'd known this one friend of mine, thousands of miles away. So realistically, there was almost no reason he should have been there. Not impossible, of course, just very unlikely. Now, sometimes I get these moments where time feels wrong. Not stopped exactly, but stretched. The world slows down at the edges. Little details sharpen all at once, the way they do in a movie when a character suddenly notices everything around them. It can feel peaceful for half a second, then strange, then almost too strange. That day, while I was walking my route, I started noticing people on the street who looked like my old friend. Not just one person, several. At first, I thought maybe I was just tired, or maybe the city had a lot of people with similar features. I even wondered whether his family might have roots there somehow, some shared look that kept showing up in passing faces. Then I saw someone who looked almost exactly like him. The only differences were that this person had long blonde hair tied back, a bandana, and sunglasses. But the face, the build, the way he moved, it all tugged at something in me. And the thing is, I've known people who prefer to stay unnoticed, people who keep their lives quiet for reasons of their own. So the idea that my friend might be trying not to be recognized did not feel completely impossible. I noticed him. And then he noticed me noticing him. That was the part that made my stomach tighten a little. He turned around and came toward me from behind. I didn't say anything at first. I'm also the kind of person who tends to keep a low profile, and if it really was him, asking directly would have revealed me too. Besides, I looked different than I had back when we knew each other. Maybe different enough that he wouldn't have recognized me right away. Then he spoke. His voice was not quite right. It was higher than my friend's voice, lighter somehow. But even then I thought, well, a person could change their voice if they wanted to. He asked if I knew where a certain street was. I told him I was new to the area and didn't know. That was true. Then we went our separate ways. After he left, the feeling didn't disappear right away. Time stayed stretched and strange for several more minutes, like the air had been pulled thin. Eventually, everything settled back into its normal rhythm. I still don't know what to make of it. My friend was older than me, though he had always seemed healthy. He was also the kind of person who lived quietly, using burner phones and keeping himself hard to track. I know that might sound odd, but people do live that way. So I don't really have a way to check whether he's still around, or whether he knew anything about that moment, assuming it was him at all. And yes, I understand the obvious explanation. Maybe it was just my perception playing tricks on me. Maybe I was tired. Maybe my mind connected dots that weren't actually connected. That's possible, and I can accept that. But the experience didn't feel ordinary. It felt like walking through a moment that had been folded wrong. I don't know how many people experience time distortions like that. For a long time, I thought I was nearly alone in having strange things happen, because people don't usually talk about them. When they do, they often get treated like they're unstable or making things up. So maybe these experiences are rare, or maybe more people have them than we realize, and they've just learned to keep quiet. Today, I want to tell you about one of the strangest coincidences I've ever experienced, because honestly, it still gives me chills when I think about it. So, last night, I had this incredibly vivid dream. Not the kind of dream where everything feels blurry and random, but the kind where every detail feels strangely sharp. In the dream, there was this enormous crimson building. It wasn't especially tall, maybe only a few floors high, but it stretched so far sideways that it almost felt impossible. It stood alone in this wide, empty field, and the only other building nearby was the apartment I was living in. The whole place felt deserted and unsettling. Just open land, silence, and these two lonely buildings sitting there like they didn't belong anywhere. Then, out of nowhere, a girl came running from behind the red building. And because the building was so ridiculously long, it took her forever to reach us. We could see her from far away, just running and running across that empty space. When she finally got close, she looked at us and said, "Look at the window." So we looked. There was a window on maybe the 4th floor, maybe the 5th, and sitting right on the edge of it were two little girls, their legs dangling outside like it was nothing. They were playing some kind of hand game, almost like rock, paper, scissors, completely calm. But then, they stood up on the window ledge, and they started jumping around, playing these dangerous little games right there on the edge. I remember feeling this awful tightness in my chest, because it looked like they were going to fall at any second. Then, suddenly, 3 more girls appeared beside them. Now there were 5 of them. All 5 started playing on that ledge together, laughing and jumping like they had no idea how dangerous it was. More people began gathering around me, all of us staring up at them, completely frozen. And then, all 5 girls held hands and jumped. They hit the ground hard. Everyone rushed toward them, but when we got close, we realized something was wrong. They looked human from a distance, but up close, they weren't really human at all. Their bodies seemed artificial somehow. I could see bones, and the bones looked real, but their flesh was strange, almost jelly-like. There was no blood, not a single drop. After that, I went back to my apartment. I remember trying to do something simple, but I kept messing it up again and again, like something was interfering with me. Then somehow, my sister realized I was being haunted, and I could see it too. Not clearly, but like a dark shadow nearby. The ghost's name was Gracie. That part really stayed with me, because that name is not common around me at all. I'm from India, and I've never personally known anyone with that name. I haven't even heard it much in the movies or shows I usually watch. In the dream, my sister and I tried to play something religious on my phone, something protective, but no matter where we searched, YouTube, apps, anywhere, we couldn't find what we needed. We kept searching, and then suddenly I remembered, wait, I can recite it myself. So I started reciting it out loud, and right after that, I woke up. It was around 3 or 4 in the morning. Now here's the part that really disturbed me. Later that morning, I went to work. I'm still in training, so I've been spending time working in stores. For a while, there were no customers at all. The place was quiet. Then the first customer of the day walked in, and her name was Gracie. That was the first time in my entire life I had ever met someone with that name. Maybe it was just a coincidence. It probably was. But after having that dream only a few hours earlier, hearing that name in real life felt deeply unsettling. Like the dream had left a small crack open, and something from it had quietly stepped through. I'm not totally sure whether I'm asking for advice or just trying to make sense of everything. But this has been weighing on me, and it's really about someone close to me. A friend of mine lost her dad a few weeks ago after a painful fight with cancer. For privacy, I'll call him Granddad. I'll call my friend Lily, and I'll call her little boy Milo. Lily has dogs, and one thing that feels important is that none of the dogs have been acting strange. Nothing about their behavior has really changed. Most of what's been happening seems to center around Milo. Granddad's illness moved fast. He was diagnosed sometime last year, and earlier this year the family was told it was terminal. After that, he declined pretty quickly. He spent time going in and out of the hospital, but in the end, he was able to come home on hospice. He passed there, surrounded by the people who loved him. The night before he died, Lily and Milo were at his house. He had that sudden burst of energy people sometimes get near the end, and for a little while, it felt like a good day. But later that evening, he became really unsettled. At one point, he started crying out, "Help me!" again and again. Lily decided it was best to take Milo home. She didn't want her dad to become more distressed, and she didn't want Milo to see too much of what was happening. But as they were leaving, Milo said he saw a figure. He described it as someone who had been hit by a car, and he said it told him, "Someone is going to die here." He said it followed them for a while. It even gave him a name. Milo said it looked human, but it was dressed all in dark clothes. I was actually on the phone with Lily when Milo saw it, so I heard some of this unfold in real time. The next day, Granddad passed away. That same day, Lily's front door opened on its own. It has a coded deadbolt, so that really unsettled her. A couple of days later, Lily heard someone call her name. Around the same time, she smelled cigarette smoke. Granddad had smoked for years, right up until his cancer diagnosis. Then another night, Lily heard a loud crash. When she went to check, Milo's toy organizer had been completely emptied. The bins were dumped and scattered everywhere. The dogs weren't loose in the house. Milo had been asleep in Lily and her husband's bed, and everyone else had been in bed too. A few days ago, Milo came up to Lily and said, "Someone just rubbed my back. It was Granddad." He told me the same thing the next day, completely unprompted. But in that same conversation, He didn't remember the figure from the night before Granddad died at all. He didn't remember seeing someone get hit by a car. He didn't remember the warning about someone dying there. It was like that part had disappeared from his mind. Then, 2 nights ago, Granddad's wife said she saw him standing in her doorway. That was the only experience she's had, so maybe it could have been grief or exhaustion. I don't know. But with everything else going on, it's hard not to wonder. And then tonight, Milo was in the living room while Lily was in the bedroom. She called for him to come in with her, and he said, "I'm staying in here because Granddad's with me. I'll be okay." That really scared Lily, because when she went to check on him, he was just sitting calmly on the couch, playing on his tablet. That might sound normal, but for Milo, it really isn't. He's usually very attached to Lily and doesn't like being in a separate room from her. My worry is that the figure Milo saw may have been some kind of death presence, maybe something connected to Granddad's passing. And I keep wondering whether, with everything so raw and open around that time, something either negative or not fully understood may have attached itself to Milo. Or maybe it really is Granddad, staying close because he loved him so much. Granddad was deeply attached to Milo, and Milo was very close to him too. He was also very close to Lily. I know people say children can be more sensitive to things adults don't pick up on, and Lily has had experiences before, but in this house, she doesn't really feel or see much herself. That's part of what worries her. She's afraid something might be pretending to be Granddad so it can get close to Milo. I guess I'm just trying to understand whether that sounds possible or whether I'm reading too much into it. I don't want to scare anyone more than they already are, but I also don't want to ignore something if it's worth paying attention to. I honestly still don't know how to explain this. And even now, thinking back on it gives me that uneasy feeling in my chest. This happened about 3 years ago, on a completely ordinary night. Nothing felt strange. I wasn't sick, I wasn't upset, I wasn't drinking, nothing like that. I just got ready for bed like I always did. My routine back then was the same every night. I'd plug my phone in, set it on the little shelf beside my bed, and go to sleep. I had done that for years without even thinking about it, but the next morning I woke up much later than usual. Right away, something felt off. I reached over for my phone, expecting it to be where it always was, but it wasn't there. After a few seconds of half-asleep searching, I found it underneath me, and it was dead. That alone was weird, because I had no memory of taking it off the charger or falling asleep with it in my hand. But I tried to brush it off. I figured maybe I had been more tired than I realized. So I plugged it in, waited for it to turn back on, and opened Snapchat. That's when my stomach dropped. I had messages from people I barely ever spoke to. Then I saw loads of messages from friends too. Way more than normal. Instantly, I knew something had happened. My first thought was, did I post something? So before replying to anyone, I checked my Snapchat story. Nothing. Then I checked Instagram just in case. Nothing there either. I thought maybe people were messing with me, but then I opened a message from my friend Callan, and he said, "Why do you have that on your story?" I checked again. Still nothing. There was no story showing for me at all. I told him I couldn't see anything, and he sent me a screen recording. Then he sent a screenshot too. And there it was, a story, posted from my account. It was this ridiculous meme picture. Nothing serious, nothing embarrassing in a massive way, just completely random. But the thing was, I couldn't see it from my own account. It didn't exist on my end. That's when I started feeling properly creeped out, because my sisters hadn't messaged me about it. Neither had Mara, one of my closest friends. And those are exactly the people who would have told me first if I had posted something strange. So I messaged them and asked, "Can you see my story?" They both said no. Then I started asking other people. Some could see it, some couldn't. There was no pattern at all. It was like the story existed for certain people, but not for others. And somehow, I was one of the people who couldn't see it, even though it was supposedly posted from my own account. I asked someone who could see it to reply to the story, hoping that maybe if they replied, I'd be able to open it from the message and delete it. But no, their reply came through, yet I still had no option to remove the story. At that point, I was really starting to panic. I barely ever posted anything anywhere, so having some random meme sitting on my story felt bizarre enough. But not being able to see it or delete it made it so much worse. Then my friend told me the story said it had been posted hours earlier. I don't remember the exact wording anymore, but I do remember working out the time. It would have been around 5 a.m., and I know I was asleep at 5 a.m. At least, I'm almost certain I was. The other strange part is the photo itself. I'm nearly sure that meme wasn't even in my camera roll. Maybe it was and I just forgot, but I really don't think so. It was on an old phone, so I can't check anymore. I kept trying to make it make sense. Maybe I was exhausted and somehow fell asleep holding my phone. Maybe I woke up without remembering and posted something by accident. Maybe the picture really was saved somewhere on my phone. But none of that explains why I couldn't see my own story. It doesn't explain why only random people could see it. It doesn't explain why people close to me couldn't see it. It doesn't explain why I couldn't delete it. And it definitely doesn't explain why my phone was dead underneath me when I had no memory of using it after going to bed. For a while, I wondered if I had been hacked, but even that didn't fully add up. Why would a hacker post a random meme, only make it visible to some people, and hide it from me? The whole thing made me feel like I had lost a chunk of time. Not in a dramatic way, but in this quiet, horrible way where you start questioning your own memory. I still have a screenshot, and my friend still had the screen recording at the time, so I know it actually happened. It wasn't just a dream, or me misreading something. I've gone over it so many times, and I still don't have a proper answer. It's probably the strangest thing that has ever happened to me, and honestly, it still bothers me. I want to start by saying I'm really not the kind of person who calls every strange thing paranormal. I grew up in Appalachia, and I still live around these mountains, so I was raised hearing all the old stories people tell about this place. And sure, I've seen strange things here. Most people who live in the mountains have. But I've never been quick to say, that was supernatural. Except for this. The first time it happened, I was 9 years old. It was Christmas Eve, and I was in bed, wide awake, because of course I was. Christmas morning was only a few hours away, and I was a kid with absolutely no chance of falling asleep. Then I heard this sound. I didn't know what it was. I still don't, honestly. But I remember the fear hitting me instantly. At first, it sounded like it was right outside my window. Then it sounded like it was under my bed. Then it was in the closet. And I know how that sounds. I know people might say my imagination was running wild because I was a child, but it wasn't like that. The sound was moving. The direction of it changed so clearly that even at 9 years old, I knew I wasn't just confusing myself. I laid there completely still for several minutes. I didn't even want to breathe too loudly. The noise kept going, and what I remember most is how rhythmic it was. Same sound, same length, same pause. Over and over again, with no break. The only reason I finally got up was because I heard my older brother, Nolan, open his bedroom door. He was about 14 at the time. When I stepped into the hallway, he looked at me and immediately said, "You hear that too?" And that scared me even more, because he had heard the exact same thing. He said it had been moving around his room too, from outside his window to different corners inside his bedroom. And while our rooms were close, they weren't right beside each other. For something outside to move between both windows, it would have had to go around the side of the house, through the snow, without leaving any sound of movement. And whatever was making that noise sounded big enough that it should have made some kind of sound walking through snow. Nolan described it as a person getting hit in the throat and trying really hard to breathe. I've never found a better way to explain it. It sounded human, but wrong. Like someone wheezing as hard as they possibly could through a crushed or injured airway. It sounded painful. It sounded desperate. Even as a kid, I remember thinking that if a real person sounded like that, they were in serious trouble. Our parents heard us talking in the hallway and came out to check on us. We told them what we were hearing, and the sound was still happening. Nolan and I could both hear it clearly from the hallway, but our parents said they couldn't hear anything at all. That part has always bothered me. My parents weren't the type to brush things off just to calm us down. They could see we were genuinely terrified. If they had heard it, they would have said so. I really believe that. But they heard nothing. Over the years, I've asked people what they think it could have been. Online, in person, everywhere. I've heard every answer you can imagine. Foxes, owls, raccoons, possums, mice in the walls, an injured deer, some kind of sick animal. I've looked up all those sounds. None of them were even close. The next morning, my family and I went outside to look around the house. There was snow on the ground, but there were no footprints, no tracks at all. It hadn't snowed during the night, and there wasn't enough wind to cover anything up. There was just nothing. The second time it happened, I was 13. I was sitting on the living room couch in the middle of the day, home alone, with the window just off to my side. And then I heard it again. That same wheezing. It was daylight, which somehow made it worse. I know that probably sounds strange, but it shook me so badly that I couldn't even make myself turn and look out the window. When I'm really scared, I freeze. I always have. Some people run, some people scream, some people investigate. I just lock up. So I sat there while it happened. This time, it didn't last as long. Maybe a minute, maybe two. It was quieter than the first time, and it didn't move around the room. It stayed outside the window. After it stopped, I waited a few minutes before I finally looked outside. Again, no tracks. Nothing near the window. Nothing in the yard. I went straight to my room after that and didn't tell many people about it for a long time. Then, a few nights ago, I heard it again. I was in bed and it was late. The room was quiet, and out of nowhere, there it was. Only this time, it was much softer, much shorter, maybe 10 seconds total. 2 or 3 low, strained wheezing sounds, and then it stopped. It was so quiet I almost convinced myself I hadn't heard it at all. But I know that sound. I wish I could tell you exactly where it came from this last time, but I can't. It was too brief, too faint, and honestly, I was too stunned to process it clearly. I just lay there trying to decide if it was really happening again. And I keep thinking about that old idea that once is strange, twice is a coincidence, and 3 times is a pattern. That's why I'm telling this now. Because whatever that sound is, it came back. I know this is going to sound like something pulled straight out of a cheap internet horror story. And honestly, that's part of what still bothers me about it. It almost feels like whatever happened was aware of how ridiculous it seemed. Like it was playing into that on purpose. But this really did happen to me, and for a long time, I kept it tucked away in the back of my mind. I was about 9 years old at the time. It was sometime in the early afternoon, maybe around 1 or 2, and I was alone in my bedroom watching TV. I remember scrolling through the search menu, the one that brought up a little watch list as you typed or moved through different titles. I was bored, just clicking through things without really looking for anything specific. Then I saw it. The title had Elmo's name in big white letters, bold and plain, almost too plain. The thumbnail showed him standing on the left side of the screen, staring off somewhere past the edge of the frame. Behind him was this flat gray background that faded darker toward the top. The strange thing is, I never liked Elmo. I didn't really like Sesame Street in general. Something about the characters always made me uncomfortable, even when I was little. So I have no idea why something like that would have been suggested to me. But what caught my attention was the category. It was listed as a documentary. That made me curious enough to click on it, which I still regret. At the time, I thought maybe it was some behind-the-scenes special or a weird making-of feature. It started that way too. There was a studio intro, little opening credits, and then it cut to an interview with a man who said he was the director. He looked like he was somewhere in his 40s, with tired eyes and streaks of gray in his hair. After that, there was a woman named Mara, maybe in her early 30s, with dark auburn hair. She was introduced as one of the writers. Then it showed 3 kids sitting in separate chairs, each talking like they had been part of the cast. Everyone was discussing normal production stuff, costumes, sets, rehearsals, what it was like filming with puppet characters. It all felt strangely legitimate. Then the footage changed. Without warning, it cut to Elmo. He was standing in front of that same gray background from the thumbnail. No music, no interview audio, nothing. He was just staring directly into the camera. At first, I froze because it felt so sudden. Then he started getting closer. Not walking exactly, more like the image itself was pushing toward me. His face kept filling more and more of the screen, and I had this horrible feeling that he wasn't looking at a camera anymore. He was looking at me. I stared back for a few seconds, too scared to move, and then I finally snapped out of it and turned the TV off. For a moment, I just sat there. My whole body felt locked up. Then I ran out of my room and into the living room. I'm honestly surprised I didn't cry, because I was terrified in a way I didn't really understand. I didn't go back into my bedroom until my little brother came with me. I told him I just didn't want to be alone, but I didn't tell him why. I was embarrassed, I think. Or maybe I was afraid saying it out loud would make it feel more real. When I checked the watch list again later, the documentary was gone. I searched for it. I tried to find the title again. Nothing came up. No thumbnail, no listing, no history, no proof that it had ever been there. So I told myself I had imagined it, that maybe I'd been tired, or maybe I'd clicked on something else and misunderstood what I saw. That explanation helped a little, but not enough. For about a week afterward, I had nightmares about that gray background and that face moving closer. Eventually, I buried the memory. I didn't bring it up again until years later, after my family had moved out of that house. When I finally told them, they half joked that maybe something had been feeding off my fear, like some nasty little creature that knew exactly how to scare a kid and enjoyed every second of it. I laughed when they said that, but honestly, part of me still wonders if they were closer to the truth than any of us wanted to admit. Before I get into the experiences themselves, I want to explain what I mean when I say spirits. Honestly, I still don't fully know what I believe. I don't think anyone can prove, with absolute certainty, what these things are. But based on what I've gone through, I do believe there are dark or negative entities around us. I don't think they're the same as what people might call good spirits. To me, good spirits are more like loved ones who have passed away. Family, friends, people who were once here with us. I don't necessarily believe they're still walking around on Earth the way we are, but I do believe they stay connected to us somehow. But the darker things, I don't think they were ever human. I also don't really like calling them demons because I'm not a religious person. That's where it gets complicated for me. Maybe there's some kind of negative energy that has taken shape, or maybe there's something way beyond what we're able to understand. I don't know exactly what they are, but I do believe they exist. The first experience that really shook me happened when my family and I were in the middle of moving out of our old house and into the place we live now. It was one of my last nights there, and I was in the bathroom by myself. I was facing the shower curtain when, out of nowhere, it was yanked hard to the side. And I mean, yanked. I could actually see the curtain cave in where it looked like someone had grabbed it with a hand. There was no one else in the bathroom. No window open, no air blowing, nothing that could have caused it. I just froze. There had been smaller, strange things in that house before, but nothing like that. That one stayed with me because, I'm sorry, but I still can't find a normal explanation for it. Another time, my sister Lena and I were sitting on the couch together. We had 2 cats, and both of them were asleep on the couch with us. My dad was asleep in his room, and there was nobody else in the house. Then suddenly, we heard this loud shuffling sound. It sounded exactly like someone dragging their feet quickly across the floor, coming straight toward us. Both of us jumped at the same time and looked at each other. We didn't even have to say anything at first, because we both knew we had heard the exact same thing. But when we looked, there was nobody there. The cats were still on the couch. My dad was still asleep. Nothing had fallen. Nothing had moved. That one still bothers me because it sounded so physical. It wasn't some vague noise in the walls. It sounded like a person rushing toward us. And then there was the Ouija board. I know people make jokes about them, and I understand why. They were sold in toy stores at one point, so of course some people don't take them seriously. But I'm telling you, they are not something to mess around with casually. The first time I used one, I didn't go into it scared. I didn't leave the session scared either. So I really don't believe this was just me psyching myself out. But the week after that was one of the worst weeks of my life. Before using that board, I had never had sleep paralysis. Not once. Then the very next night, it happened. I woke up unable to move, and I felt something grab my shoulders with force. Then I heard what sounded like a woman growling right beside my ear. It felt like she was slowly dragging me across the bed toward the edge. I remember breathing so heavily, trying with everything in me to snap out of it. But I couldn't. When I finally woke up fully, I had to just sit there and collect myself. I was terrified. And it kept happening that entire week. Every time I fell asleep, I went straight into paralysis. Sometimes it was simple, just being stuck and unable to move. Other times, there were visuals. Other times, sounds. It felt like my room wasn't safe anymore. There was even one night where I woke up, or thought I woke up, in my room. Something immediately felt wrong. I tried to turn on the lights, but they wouldn't work. Then I looked into the hallway, and I felt the darkest energy I've ever felt in my life. It was heavy, like the air itself had gone bad. I remember feeling pure fear, and then I woke up for real. The only thing that finally made it stop was sleeping with the lights on and completely covering myself with blankets and pillows. My face, my body, everything. I don't know why that worked, but somehow it did. After that, the paralysis stopped. I kept sleeping with the lights on for almost a year before I was finally comfortable sleeping in the dark again. So, what do I take from all of this? Whatever these things are, I don't think they like light. At least in my case, they really seemed to lose power when the lights were on. And please, be careful with Ouija boards. I've used them since then, but only with much more caution and respect. Honestly, do your research first, or don't bother touching one at all. I know the brain is powerful. I know skeptics will always have reasons for why things can't be real. And I'm not saying every strange thing is paranormal, but I've experienced enough to know that something is out there, and I do think sleep paralysis is connected to it somehow. I don't believe these things usually hurt us physically. At least, I've never been physically harmed by it. But mentally, that's where I think they get to you. That's where they leave the mark. I want to tell you about something strange that's been happening around our house. A few months back, I was home alone except for our 2 cats. I had a dull headache that day, nothing dramatic, just enough to make everything feel a little off. I remember walking down the stairs and turning into the living room, where we have this big window that looks out over the front yard. And just as I came into the room, I caught something in the corner of my eye. It looked like a figure, almost human-shaped, but not quite. Mostly dark brown, standing near one of the trees. For a second, I thought it was leaning there, like it had been watching the house. But when I turned my head to really look at it, it bolted. I mean, it moved fast, faster than anything I've ever seen move through a yard. It slipped behind the tree and disappeared toward the neighbor's place. The part that stayed with me was where it had been standing and the direction it ran. I didn't know it yet, but that would matter later. Then, a few weeks ago, something else happened. I was upstairs, looking out one of the windows. I can't remember whether I was alone that time or not, but I remember this sudden pull in my attention. Something made me look down and to the right, and then I felt it. That unmistakable feeling of being watched. I didn't see a face. I didn't see a body. What I saw was a flash of a white wing as it flew away. It was about the size you'd expect on a crow, except it was completely white. Now, we do have white birds around here. Gulls, swans, a few others near the water. But I have never seen an all-white bird in our yard, and I can't think of any reason a gull or swan would be that close to the house when there's a reservoir about a mile away. Whatever it was, it flew off in the same direction as the first thing I saw. A little while later, my fiancée, Alara, and I were putting together some furniture, and I finally told her, "I've seen 2 things around the house that I can't explain." She stopped what she was doing and asked me if I was serious. Then she told me what had happened to her. She had been working from the couch one Friday afternoon, right in the middle of an important meeting with senior leadership from her company. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw movement outside. When she looked up, there was this white flash in the front yard. It shot from the yard toward the side of the house, but she said the strangest part was how it moved. It didn't move like a bird. It didn't move like a reflection. It was too fast, and it felt like it was trying not to be seen. She said it wasn't on the ground either. It was maybe 5 feet up in the air, only about 1 or 2 feet tall and wide. Not human-shaped at all. More like an abstract blur, almost like a wing, but not clearly one. You know how in old photographs, when something moves too quickly, it leaves that smeared blur behind it? She said it looked like that, except it was happening in real life. We do have roads in front of and behind the house, and sometimes headlights can glare through the windows. But this was in the afternoon, and we've never seen anything like it before or since. We checked the security cameras too. Nothing. So now we have a few theories, though none of them feel complete. Around the time I first saw the brown figure, We had started working on the flower beds near the front door. We were careful about it. We chose native plants, looked up how to care for them, and tried to bring that part of the yard back to life. As far as I know, those beds hadn't been touched in years. The woman who lived here before us didn't really have the strength for gardening anymore. So part of me wonders whether we disturbed something that had been resting there. Or maybe, in some strange way, we woke something up. There's also a patch of clover in the yard, near the area where we've seen these things. Right in the middle of it, the grass looks pressed down, almost like something has been sitting there. Another thought is connected to my mother. She has always believed she has guardian angels. I don't know if I believe that about myself, but I did text her after all this happened. She didn't say, "Yes, that's what it is," but she told me I should plant a white rose and make peace with whatever was there. And then there's the more tender possibility. Alara and I have been trying to have a baby. Around the time of the first sighting, she had a miscarriage. So we wondered, quietly and carefully, if maybe what I saw was the soul of that child. Maybe coming near us, maybe shy, maybe not ready to be seen. Or maybe, and I know how this sounds, it could be the souls of future children passing through, trying to see what life with us might be like, trying to decide whether this is the right home, the right time, the right world to enter. I'm not usually someone who jumps to paranormal explanations. I know there's always a chance that stress, grief, light, animals, and imagination all tangled together and made something ordinary look impossible. We do have plenty of wildlife around here. Birds, squirrels, stray cats wandering through the neighborhood. The area has enough trees that something could easily hide or move quickly without us understanding what we saw. But still, 3 sightings, similar area, same direction of movement, that same feeling of something not wanting to be noticed. I don't know what it is. I just know that something has been moving through our yard, and whatever it is, it feels like it sees us before we ever see it. I've been a nurse for nearly 5 decades now, and I still work as a pediatric hospice RN. These days, I care for newborns and infants with severe congenital conditions. Sometimes, parents choose to bring their baby home so life support can be withdrawn in a quiet, loving place, surrounded by family. Those moments are tender beyond words, and maybe someday I'll share more about them. I became a hospice nurse after losing my 2 boys. When they were dying, I couldn't do the things every mother wishes she could do. I couldn't take away their pain. I couldn't ease all their fear. I couldn't hold them through every single second the way my heart wanted to. But later, I realized I could do that for others. My first hospice work was in an inpatient AIDS facility back in the late 1980s, when the disease was still considered a death sentence. We cared for people of all ages there. When that facility closed because of funding, I moved to a small 10-bed hospice unit, mostly for adults. After that, I spent several years in a pediatric hospice unit, caring for newborns through teenagers. That unit eventually closed too, also because of funding. Now I do one-on-one home care with babies and children who are terminally ill. But this story happened years ago, in that little adult inpatient hospice unit. I had come in for a 12-hour shift, and we had a few new patients that day. One of them was an elderly woman, I'd guess maybe late 70s or early 80s. I'll call her Miss Eleanor. She was completely unresponsive, total care. She was there for end-of-life support, just like many of our patients were. I cleaned her up, repositioned her, made sure she was comfortable, gave her pain medication, and then moved on to care for my next patient. As the shift went on, I was walking down the hallway to help someone else. Out of habit, I glanced into each room as I passed, just checking that everyone was settled and safe. When I passed Miss Eleanor's room, I saw her sitting on the side of her bed. Her side rails were down. Her feet were touching the floor. She was sitting upright by herself, smiling right at me. And she looked young, not just a little more alert, not simply more awake. She looked radiant, peaceful, almost glowing from the inside out. I had already passed her doorway by a few steps when my mind caught up with what I'd seen. I stopped. Then I backed up and looked into her room again. And there she was, back in bed, side rails up, unresponsive again, in the same position I had placed her in earlier. There was one more thing. When I saw her sitting there smiling, she had both legs. But in her physical body, Miss Eleanor only had one. Her other leg had been amputated years before. I stood there for a moment, just taking it in. Then I smiled and spoke softly to her. I said, "You showed me your soul." I thanked her. I told her I believed she was getting ready to pass on, and that I was grateful she had allowed me to witness even a small part of what she was experiencing. I shared it with the other nurses too. In hospice, especially in those quiet rooms near the end of life, people see things. They hear things. They feel things. Not everyone talks about it, but many of us know. At the end of my shift, Miss Eleanor was still alive. I gave report to the oncoming staff and told them what I had seen. They weren't frightened or dismissive. They were almost happy for me because they understood how rare and sacred something like that can feel. Then I went home. I remember walking into my house, tired from the long shift, expecting nothing more than a quiet hallway and maybe a cup of tea. But there, standing in my hallway, was Miss Eleanor. She was wearing a soft robe. She was smiling at me. Only now she looked about 28 or 30 years old. Her hair was beautiful, as if she had just stepped out of a salon. She looked whole, bright, young, and she had both legs. She stood there for only a brief moment. Then she faded away. In my heart, I thanked her again. I didn't say anything out loud at first. I just stood there, stunned and grateful. Then I picked up the phone and called the hospice unit. I told them, "Please go check on Miss Eleanor." They set the phone down. A minute or two later, someone came back and told me she had just died. They had been in her room only moments before, repositioning her, and she was still alive then. I don't know why she came to me. I don't know why she didn't appear to one of her loved ones instead. I had never met her before that shift. I didn't know her story, not really. I only knew her as my patient for a handful of hours, but for whatever reason, she chose to show me something before she died, and then again after. And I have carried that blessing with me ever since. I still think of her. I still thank her. Some people may hear this story and not know what to do with it. That's all right. I once told it at a nursing event with over 1,000 people in the room. Many simply stared at me, but a few smiled and nodded. They knew. Because when you work close to the edge between life and death, sometimes the veil gets very thin. And every now and then, someone lets you see the light on the other side. I used to deliver newspapers with my dad in the early morning. We were subcontractors, so the delivery truck would show up around 12:45 a.m., and by a little after 1:15, we'd have the car packed and be out on the route. For the first few weeks, nothing really happened. It was just quiet roads, porch lights, empty streets, and that strange feeling you get when the whole world seems asleep except for you. But about 2 months in, something happened that I still think about. There was one customer who lived behind a row of houses, tucked back off the road with this long driveway. Most mornings, we could either turn around in it or pull close enough for me to toss the paper right onto the porch from the car. But one morning, around 2:40 a.m., her car was parked in a way that blocked most of the driveway, so I had to get out and walk the newspaper up to her porch. I placed it down, turned around, and started walking back to the car. That's when I heard something behind me. It sounded like wings flapping in the tree, but not normal wings. Not a little bird, not an owl, not anything I'd ever heard before. This was heavy, big. The sound got louder and louder, like whatever was up there was beating the air with a lot of force. I turned around and looked up into the tree, but I couldn't see anything. No shape, no eyes, no outline. Just branches moving hard, like something had stirred them up from inside the tree. The thing is, there was no wind that morning, none at all. The air was completely still. The second I saw those branches moving, I hurried back to the car. My dad looked at me and asked what was wrong, and I told him, "Look at the tree." By then, the branches were still moving a little, but not nearly as much as before. At first, he said it was probably just wind, but I told him there wasn't any. And I knew there wasn't. Everything else around us was perfectly still. That was the only time something like that happened at that house, but for weeks afterward, I hated delivering there. Every time we pulled onto that street, I felt my stomach tighten. We don't deliver newspapers anymore, but we still drive past that area sometimes because it's close to where we live and on the way to the store. I still look over there. I still wonder what was in that tree. And honestly, I'm glad I didn't see it. If I had to guess, maybe it was some huge bird, something like a shoebill or a crane. But birds like that don't live around here. We don't have anything with wings big enough to shake tree branches like that. The second incident happened about a month later. There was a funeral home on our route, and one of our customers lived there. I never liked that stop. I wouldn't get out of the car for it. I'd always have my dad pull into the drive, get close to the steps, and I'd place the paper where I could without stepping outside. Nothing strange had ever happened there before, and nothing strange happened thereafter. Just that one night. It was somewhere around 3:10 in the morning. We had just dropped off the paper and were pulling out of the driveway, turning right toward the next street. For some reason, I felt like I needed to look back at the main entrance. The front doors were glass, so normally you could see into the little space between the outside door and the inner door. But when I looked, there was a man standing there. Just standing between the doors. At first I thought maybe it was a person. Weird, sure, because of the time, but still possible. Then I realized I could see through him. I could see the inside of the building through his body. I did a double take immediately because my brain didn't want to accept what I'd just seen. But when I looked again, he was gone. I know people could say I was tired, or that my mind was playing tricks on me. But I wasn't tired on that route. I was always awake. Alert, even. There's something about those hours that keeps your nerves sharp. Those were the only two strange things that ever happened while we had that job. We didn't stay with it much longer after that. But even now, I can still replay both moments in my head. The branches shaking in the still air. The man in the funeral home doorway. Clear as anything. And I still don't know what I saw. Apparently, the more I look into this, the more I realize I'm not the only one who's had strange things happen after having a baby. Maybe it's lack of sleep. Maybe it's postpartum anxiety. Maybe it's something paranormal being drawn to a newborn. I don't know. I just know what happened in my house, and honestly, I'd really like to know if anyone else has gone through something similar. My husband and I live in the house I grew up in. When I was a kid, I would hear things sometimes. Voices in the hallway, footsteps at night, little sounds that didn't quite belong. But nothing ever really terrified me. My mom and my sister, though, had a very different experience. My sister used to say she saw a tall shadow figure around the house. She even gave it a name as a joke. She called it Albert. Years later, we found out we actually had an ancestor named Albert, which made the whole thing feel a little less funny. Things would move around in her room. Sometimes strange shapes or faces would show up in photos. But the moment I'll never forget happened when we were teenagers. We were sitting on her bed, just talking, when suddenly everything on the shelves in her closet came crashing down at once. Not one thing slipping, not a shelf breaking. Everything flew off. We both screamed and ran out of the room. My mom saw the shadow too. She also used to hear my sister or me calling for her when we hadn't said anything. And my dad, who is deeply religious and does not believe in paranormal things at all, heard it once too. He and my mom were in the kitchen talking when they both stopped because they heard my voice call, "Mom?" from another room. The problem was, I wasn't home. I was at a friend's house. Eventually, my mom and sister moved out, and they both said whatever it was seemed to follow them. They still heard and saw things in their new places. I believed them, partly because when my husband and I moved into the old house, it became quiet. Completely quiet. For 3 years, nothing really happened. Then we brought our daughter home last autumn. At first, I tried to explain it away. I thought maybe I was just awake at hours I hadn't been awake before. Maybe the house had always made those sounds, and I was only noticing them now because I was up feeding a baby in the dark. But then the voices started again. Footsteps too. The first thing that really bothered us was that my husband began hearing my voice calling for him at night. We blamed exhaustion at first. Newborn fog is its own strange little universe. But by the time our daughter was around 2 months old, she was sleeping much better. She usually only woke once, so I handled the night feedings so he could sleep before work. And he still kept hearing me call his name. Except I wasn't. The first moment that truly scared me happened one night when our daughter woke up screaming. Not crying, screaming. I was pacing back and forth with her, bouncing her, whispering to her, trying everything I could think of. Then, out of nowhere, I felt this cold rush crawl up my back. It wasn't like a draft. It felt focused, heavy, like something had stepped close behind me. The second it happened, my daughter stopped crying. Completely stopped. Then her eyes fixed on something just over my shoulder. I didn't turn around. I just sat down in the rocking chair with her pressed against me and stayed there, frozen and wide awake, for the rest of the night. A couple weeks later, it happened again. My daughter woke up early, so I brought her into the living room to feed her. We played for a little while, and then I got ready to rock her down for her first nap. At that time, the rocking chair was facing away from the hallway, with its back toward our bedroom door. I sat down, and she started fussing. Then I felt that same cold chill. She went quiet. Her eyes moved past me. And then I heard our bedroom doorknob turn. It clicked. The door had been fully shut, but it slowly opened behind me. I called out for my husband because I wanted so badly for there to be a normal explanation. I hoped he had heard the baby fussing and gotten up to check on us. But when I turned around, no one was there. I shouted for him again, louder this time, and he came stumbling out of bed, still half asleep. He had been snoring. He hadn't touched the door. That scared me so badly that we rearranged the living room the next day. The rocking chair is in a corner now. I need my back to the wall. Since then, I've seen the bedroom door open a couple more times, but I don't latch it fully anymore. That way I can tell myself it's just the fan, that maybe the air finally pushed it open after running all night. I still hear the voices sometimes. I still hear footsteps in the dark. But nothing has scared me as badly as those 2 nights. So I guess that's why I'm sharing this. Has anyone else experienced something like this after having a baby? Because I keep trying to explain it away, but a part of me feels like something in this house woke back up when we brought our daughter home. I've always been a very spiritual person, and in some way, I feel like I've had a gift my whole life. It's come and gone over the years, but it was always there in the background. Most of the time, it felt gentle, comforting even. But last year, something changed. I started seeing really dark, frightening things as I was falling asleep. Not dreams exactly, because I was still in that in-between place where you're not fully asleep yet. And these visions were so graphic and disturbing that they genuinely scared me in a way I had never experienced before. Before that, anything spiritual I had experienced had been peaceful or meaningful. But this was different. It happened around 5 times, and each time it was something slightly different. The first time, I saw this figure with blackened skin, a badly distorted mouth, blood around it, and a face that looked burned. It didn't appear smoothly either. It flashed in and out, almost like someone flicking a light switch. That's the only way I can describe it. Then, somehow, it looked like it was standing high up at the back of a church, just watching. Another time, I saw something with red skin and horns. It looked furious, but that one felt more like a still image than a moving vision. Then there was another dark figure with a snake-like tongue and this horrible, threatening expression. The one that really unsettled me was gray and crawling on all 4s. I saw it come through a doorway, drop down, and then suddenly leap toward me. It came so close that I opened my eyes immediately because I couldn't handle it. Every single one of these happened only when I was beginning to fall asleep, never in the middle of the day, never when I was fully awake, just in that drifting off stage. After that, I stepped away from everything spiritual. I got rid of almost all my tools, books, crystals, tarot cards, everything. I just didn't want anything to do with it anymore. It frightened me that much. At the time, I had been heavily involved in witchcraft, tarot, crystals, and spell work since I was about 16. I had also bought some spell oils that seemed harmless enough at first, but later I found out the person who made them worked with darker spirits, including succubus-type entities. I had also been honoring Greek and Norse deities, especially Hecate and Freya. And emotionally, I was in a really bad place then. My aunt had just been diagnosed with cancer, and around the same time, my partner of nearly 6 years cheated on me. It all happened within the same week, and I was completely overwhelmed. Around that period, I also had a vision of a poppet, like the kind used in spell work. I saw someone doing spells, but I knew somehow that it wasn't my own work. That made me wonder if maybe I was spiritually vulnerable, or operating from such a low place emotionally that something negative had attached itself to me. Part of me even wondered whether something had been put on me. After those experiences, I left all of it behind. For the first time in my life, I prayed properly. I started reading the Bible. I turned to Jesus, and ever since then, I've avoided anything that feels remotely connected to the spiritual practices I used to do. But the other night, it happened again. This time, I saw a figure with long hair and a gold crown on its head. Again, it only happened as I was falling asleep. It doesn't happen often now, but when it does, it still shakes me. I've spoken to a few spiritual people about it, but most of them just think I imagined it. A medium once told me I was seeing demons, but they didn't give me any guidance beyond that. I know how it sounds, but it didn't feel like something I simply made up. The images were too vivid, too specific, and too terrifying. And because this only started after years of otherwise peaceful spiritual experiences, it left me wondering what really happened and why it changed so suddenly. Okay, so I just got back from Jame, Arizona, and I'm still trying to make sense of what happened. My girlfriend and I spent Saturday night at the Jame Grand Hotel. We ended up staying in room 14, which, according to the hotel staff and the ghost tour guide, used to be the living quarters of a man named Clint Harrow. He's apparently one of the more well-known spirits around Jame because he died at the bottom of the old elevator shaft. But honestly, that's not even where anything happened. The whole thing started when we decided, very last minute, to sign up for a ghost tour. We got lucky and took the final 2 spots. They handed us EMF readers and spirit boxes, and at first, we were kind of laughing about it. Our first stop was literally a parking lot, and I remember thinking, okay, are we really doing this? Are we just wandering around between cars with ghost hunting gadgets? But the guide explained that a lot of those parking lots were places where buildings used to stand before Jame's fires destroyed them. So underneath all that asphalt, there was history. Burned down homes, businesses, whole little pieces of people's lives. After that, we walked to a church, but we couldn't go inside, so we just stayed near the front. Nothing happened there. No readings, no voices, nothing. Then we went to the building where the tour office was located, and the guide told us stories about arson, bootlegging, and a smuggler from the Prohibition era. They dared a few of us to stand in this dark back corner, but again, nothing really happened. The final stop on the basic tour was the old smelter area. The guide told us this awful story about burned bodies mixing with the smelt and how parts of the town were built with concrete and asphalt that may have contained the ashes of the dead. So we were basically standing on streets made of ghosts. At that point, the tour was technically over unless you had paid for the extended package. My girlfriend and I looked at each other and decided, why not? We paid the extra fee and stayed with the group. That's when we went to the old Jame High School. From the outside, it already felt wrong in that old building way, like the windows were watching you instead of the other way around. Inside, it was even heavier. The guide said the building had been used for art studios and band practice rooms over the years, but the auditorium was mostly untouched and going through some repairs. After the guide gave us some history, the group started moving toward the stage. I was holding my EMF reader, and all of a sudden, it jumped from green to yellow. That was the first moment I stopped joking around. I looked around and asked, "Am I alone?" Nothing came through the spirit box. I took a few steps and the reader stayed yellow. I checked my phone. I checked the spirit box. I wanted to make sure nothing I had was causing interference. Then I asked, "What's your name?" And clear as day, through the box, I heard, "Walter." I froze. I asked it to repeat the name, but nothing came through after that. My girlfriend noticed I had stopped moving and came back toward me. Right then, I heard this soft creaking sound from the seats just above where I was standing. It sounded like someone shifting their weight in an old theater chair. I didn't want to look. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I could feel something there. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it behind me. So I asked, "Are you behind me?" No answer. My girlfriend told me we needed to stay with the group, and as soon as she got closer, the EMF reader dropped back down to 2 green dots. Then she started walking away again. The reader jumped to orange, then settled back on yellow. That's when I said out loud, "I need to go." And the spirit box said, "Don't leave." I just stood there for a second, trying to process it. My brain was scrambling for some normal explanation, but I couldn't find one. I started walking away, and the box said, "Don't." I kept going, and the EMF reader finally dropped back down to 1 green dot. I I didn't understand what had just happened. I still don't. After that, the group went downstairs to the boiler room, and there was another strange experience down there, but that's a whole separate story. When we left, we had to pass back through the auditorium. I don't know why I did it, but I said out loud, "I'm leaving, Walter." The EMF reader jumped right back to yellow. The second we walked out of the auditorium, it dropped back to one green dot. After that, we went to the cemetery, but nothing happened there. We saw a couple of scorpions, which honestly felt pretty normal compared to everything else. Then the tour ended. We went back to the hotel, and that's another story too. But here's the part that really made me decide to tell someone. I got home to Tucson this evening. I wear this silver chain that I've had for over 20 years. I took it off last night and put it back on this morning like always. Tonight, when I went to take it off, it basically fell from my neck. But when I looked at it, the clasp was still closed. It looked like the chain had been yanked or pulled hard enough to come off without unclasping. I don't have an explanation for that, and that's why I'm sharing this now. I don't know what happened in that auditorium, and I don't know if something came back with me. But what a weekend. I want to tell you about something that happened to my older sister when she was a teenager, probably a little over 10 years ago now. She told me this story years back, and even though some of the details are a little hazy, the parts I do remember have always stayed with me. It started with her closest friend, who I'll call Mira. They were the kind of friends who were practically glued together. They lived close by, spent entire weekends at each other's houses, and sleepovers were just a normal part of their friendship. One night, my sister and another friend were staying over at Mira's house. Mira had already fallen asleep, but the other two were still awake, just talking quietly and hanging out. There were a few drinking glasses sitting on a table nearby, and out of nowhere, one of them slid across the surface by itself. Not tipped, not bumped, it just moved. They both froze, of course. It was the first time anything like that had happened, and neither of them knew what to say. But they were young, and honestly, they didn't want to believe it was anything strange, so they tried to explain it away. Maybe the table was uneven. Maybe someone had nudged it without noticing. Maybe there was condensation under the glass. Anything that made it feel less frightening. A few years later, Mira's family moved into a house directly across the street from where my sister lived. Since they were still close, Mira invited my sister over to help unpack and move things around. I had been inside that house a couple of times too, because Mira had a younger sister around my age, and I remember the place having a very heavy feeling. Not scary in an obvious way, but uncomfortable, like the air had been sitting still for too long. While they were moving in, my sister went into one of the upstairs rooms. The walls were painted a faded rose color, and the room was covered in crosses, holy pictures, and little religious objects. Before Mira's family bought the house, an older man had lived there with his mother, so everyone assumed the room had probably belonged to her. People said she had been deeply religious. Later on, while going through some drawers that had been left behind, Mira's family found photographs of the man who used to live there, posing with naked women. It was strange and unsettling, especially considering the room they had found, but they didn't make a big thing out of it. Weird, yes. Paranormal, no. Then one afternoon, my sister was over at Mira's house again. The house had 2 floors, and everyone was downstairs. Mira's mom was in the kitchen making food, her dad was watching TV, and most of Mira's sisters were out. The only one supposedly home was her younger sister, who I'll call Nina. While they were sitting downstairs, they suddenly heard loud footsteps upstairs. Not soft creaking or normal house sounds. It sounded like someone running back and forth, followed by heavy banging. Mira's dad immediately shouted upstairs, thinking Nina was messing around and telling her to stop. But a few seconds later, Nina walked out of the downstairs bathroom and looked completely confused. She said, "That wasn't me." Everyone went quiet for a moment, but again, they pushed it aside. Nobody in that family was really the type to jump to ghost stories. They always tried to be practical about it, even when things didn't quite fit. Sometime after that, Mira called my sister late at night, absolutely terrified. She said there was banging and scratching coming from a room in the house that they had never been able to open. When they first moved in, that room had been locked with a padlock, and since they didn't have the key, they had just left it alone instead of breaking it open. But that night, Mira said it sounded like something was trapped inside. Scraping, hitting, moving around, loud enough that she couldn't sleep. The next morning, when everyone woke up, the door to that room was standing wide open. Inside, there was nothing dramatic. No hidden shrine, no awful discovery. Just old storage items, dusty odds and ends, and one chair sitting by itself in the middle of the room. That image bothers me the most, honestly. Just one chair, waiting there. The last thing I remember my sister telling me happened before she and Mira eventually drifted apart. My sister slept over at the house one night, and everything seemed normal when they went to bed. But sometime in the middle of the night, she woke up to the sound of crying. Then she heard what sounded like muffled screaming. It wasn't coming from inside the bedroom. It sounded like it was outside the house. There was a strong wind that night, so maybe that explains it. Wind can make strange noises when it moves through trees, gutters, cracks, and old walls. But my sister swore it didn't sound like wind. She said it sounded human. I still don't know what to think about it. Part of me wants to believe there's a logical explanation for every piece of it. Uneven tables, old pipes, animals in the walls, wind, stress, imagination. All of that is possible. But when you put everything together, the sliding glass, the footsteps upstairs, the locked room opening on its own, the scratching, the chair, and the crying outside at night, it becomes harder to brush off completely. I may ask my sister if she remembers more, because this story was told to me a long time ago, and I'm sure there are details I've forgotten. But even with the gaps, that house has always felt like one of those places where something was just slightly wrong, quietly waiting for someone to notice. I'm not exactly sure when this first happened. It feels like it was several years ago, but around Christmas of 2024, the memory started coming back to me more clearly. I remember deciding to take a nap on the couch one afternoon. The sun was bright, and I left the curtains open because I wanted to feel the warmth on me while I slept. Then I woke up, but I wasn't on the couch anymore. I was lying on a cold table, still in the same position I had fallen asleep in. In front of me stood this tall, mantis-like being, and around it were several small, gray figures. I was terrified. I tried to panic, tried to move, but I couldn't. I had experienced sleep paralysis before, twice actually, so part of me wanted to explain it that way. But this felt different, much different. I squeezed my eyes shut and begged myself to wake up. All the communication happened without speaking. It was like the voice was inside my head. The mantis-like being told me, sharply at first, to calm down. It said they were there to help me. Then it told me my heart needed help, and it asked if it could remove a small part of my hand. That broke whatever fragile calm I had left. I opened my eyes and shouted, "No!" The being seemed irritated, almost disappointed. Then it lifted one long finger, or claw, I can't remember exactly, and held it over my body. It never touched me, but somehow, it started cutting me open. There was no pain, no blood, just this faint tingling feeling, like something passing through me without resistance. When I looked down, my body was open, pale and bloodless, almost like a body in a morgue. I shut my eyes again, desperate to wake up, desperate for it to be over. The voice came back, calmer this time, and told me it was already done. I didn't want to look, but eventually I opened my eyes. There was no scar, nothing visible at all. Then the being told me they had removed most of the blood clots, but not all of them. It said there were parts they couldn't reach because my hand had been resting over my chest. I remember getting angry and asking, "Why didn't you just move it?" The voice changed then. It stopped sounding gentle. It became firm, almost stern. It told me this was exactly what humans were like. We accept a tremendous gift, refuse to give up even something small in return, and then still complain about what wasn't done perfectly. It said that if they had tried to move my hand, they might have torn off my whole arm. Then it told me I needed to see a good medical professional. It said there were still blood clots left, and if I ignored them, cerebral venous sinus thrombosis could cause a major stroke. It said I could end up in a wheelchair. And then I woke up. I wanted to forget it immediately. For a while, I tried to. But here's the part I can't quite shake. Ever since puberty, and I'm 34 now, I've always sweated easily. I wasn't extremely fit, but I wasn't overweight either. Years later, it was still bothering me enough that I finally made a doctor's appointment. The answer was basically that I was healthy, and sweating by itself wasn't really a symptom that needed medical treatment. So I tried to accept that. Later on, I started noticing this tight, constricting feeling in my chest. It wasn't pain exactly, more like a pressure that made me feel like I needed to take a deep breath to clear it. But taking a deep breath almost never helped. Sometimes it made me even more aware of the tightness. So I went to the doctor again. Again, everything seemed fine. I do have a slightly raised chest area with a shallow dip down the middle. My doctor called it a very mild funnel chest. I wanted that explanation to be enough, and for a while, I think it was. I don't know whether I had been focusing on the sensation too much before, or whether I started ignoring it too much afterward. About a year ago, I finally started working out. Physically, I feel better than I can ever remember feeling. But whenever I break even the slightest sweat, my heart feels like it's racing. Recently, we had a hiking day at work. Other people were walking, talking, drinking, even smoking, and I was just trying to focus on my breathing. And 2 years ago, my mother passed away suddenly from heart-related issues. So now I keep thinking about that dream, or whatever it was. I know how it sounds. I really do. But the strange thing is, that experience felt more caring than some of the medical appointments I've had. Frightening, yes, but not cruel. It felt like a warning. And now I'm left wondering how to ask for a thorough heart check without sounding completely irrational. Because maybe it was only a dream, but it's the kind of dream that keeps tapping on the glass, asking to be taken seriously. I'm not really sure how to explain this, or even where to begin. Ever since I was very young, I've had moments where it felt like I wasn't fully in control of myself. Not all the time, just these sudden, strange breaks where I do something completely out of character, and then come back to myself afterward feeling horrified. One of the earliest times I remember, I was around 5. I suddenly picked up a heavy stick and hurt a small animal in the yard. The second it was over, it was like I woke up. I started crying because I couldn't understand why I had done it. It didn't feel like a decision I made. There were other moments too. I'd stop whatever I was doing, grab paper, and start writing symbols or words in a language I didn't recognize. At the time, I thought it was just nonsense. Years later, I looked at some of it again and realized a few marks looked strangely close to real characters and words, some of them connected to dark or religious meanings. That scared me because I had no reason to know any of that as a child. I didn't grow up around those languages, and no one in my family knew them either. As I got older, things didn't really stop. They changed. I started noticing things moving when they shouldn't. Small objects sliding or falling. Sometimes something would be thrown across the room. My bed has shaken for no reason more than once, and I've heard voices when no one was there. The part that makes it harder to dismiss is that other people have seen and heard things around me too. So when I tell myself maybe I'm imagining it, I remember that I'm not always the only witness. The dreams are probably the worst part. I've had this recurring dream where something bright, almost like a living light, is chasing me. It tells me I can't escape, and then it goes after the people I love. Around the same time, my mother woke up screaming from a nightmare where something was trying to take me away. She said when she tried to get up and check on me, something pushed her back down. She felt pinned there, like she couldn't breathe. Another dream stayed with me for a long time. I was trapped in a place that felt like hell, and there was this enormous demon-like figure hurting me. It kept telling me I shouldn't have come back. Eventually, it let me go. But before it did, it threw me to the ground so hard that both of my legs broke in the dream. When I woke up, my legs hurt so badly I could barely walk for days. The most recent dream was different. I was lying in bed and something was above me, almost like a screen. It showed numbers and letters that kept shifting. When I finally focused on it, I saw a name, Abezethebo. I had never heard it before. There were numbers too, but I can't remember them now. What I do remember is a voice telling me not to forget the information. And there's something else I don't think was a dream. Sometimes I wake up with the feeling that someone is lying on top of me. Not violently, almost gently. I'll feel a hand brushing my hair, and I'll hear soft whispering. The words don't make sense, but the tone feels kind. The voice sounds like the same one from that first dream. I think it sounds like a woman, though I'm not completely sure. I also have dreams about the future sometimes. Not vague ones either. They end up being strangely accurate. I get déjà vu constantly, and there are moments where if I truly believe something is going to happen, it does. I know how that sounds, but it's happened enough that I can't ignore it anymore. The strangest part is that I often wake up from these dreams with bruises, scratches, or pain I can't explain. I'm almost always sick in some way too, like my body is carrying something I don't understand. I'm not saying I know what this is. I don't. That's why I'm talking about it now. I just need an honest answer. I need someone to hear me without laughing or brushing it off. I don't know if this is spiritual, psychological, something paranormal, or something else entirely. I only know that I feel like something has been close to me for most of my life, and I'm scared that if I don't understand it soon, I'm going to lose the few people I can still talk to about it. I have lived in the UK my whole life, and I bought this house back in 2001 when I was in my mid-20s. It's not an especially old house, really. I think it was built sometime in the 1960s, so it's not ancient or anything like that. The people who owned it before me were a married couple with 2 children, a boy and a girl. From what I understood, the house had originally belonged to the husband's parents. When I first came to view it, I remember thinking the place felt very tired. The decorating was badly outdated, and the whole house had this neglected feeling to it. Not filthy exactly, but it was obvious that proper cleaning and care had fallen by the wayside for quite a long time, even though the family was still living there. Not too long after I moved in, I ran into the previous owner while I was out shopping. Her name was Linda, or at least that's what I'll call her. We got talking, and it turned out they hadn't moved far at all. They'd gone about a mile away, into a house that had belonged to her parents after they passed. During that conversation, she told me a little about why they had sold the place. One of the reasons stayed with me. Apparently, her husband's father had redecorated the house shortly before his wife died. Then, after he passed away too, the husband refused to change anything. He wanted to keep the house exactly as it was, almost like a memorial to his parents. And because he refused to redecorate, Linda refused to keep up with the cleaning. I don't know for certain whether they had all lived there together while his parents were still alive, but I always had the impression they might have. Naturally, once I owned the place, I redecorated the whole house. While stripping wallpaper, I found dates and costs written directly on the walls underneath. A lot of them were from the late 1970s and early 1980s, which made the house feel strangely layered, like it had been keeping little records of itself. For years, nothing unusual happened. Then, sometime around 2014, my ex and I started getting the sense that something wasn't quite right in the house. It was never anything dramatic. No doors flying open, no voices calling our names, nothing like that. It was smaller than that, which in some ways made it easier to dismiss. We'd hear odd noises from the kitchen now and then. Sometimes things seemed to be in slightly different places from where we'd left them. The kitchen light would occasionally flicker on or off. At the time, I explained most of it away. The ground floor is made of floorboards, and there's a gap of about a foot between them and the foundations, so I assumed temperature changes could be causing the wood to shift. The heating system was newer, and I thought the pipes might be expanding and contracting in colder months. The wiring had been done a couple of years before I bought the house, but I wouldn't exactly call the work perfect. The house itself isn't brilliantly built either. The outer walls aren't very square. There's no cavity insulation. And because I live in a small village on a hill in quite an exposed area, the wind can really get around the place. So for a while, I had a neat little explanation for everything. But then came the feeling of being watched. That was harder to explain. Both of us started noticing it. You'd be sitting there and suddenly feel as though someone had stepped into the room behind you, even when you knew perfectly well nobody had. Every now and then we'd catch shadows or tiny movements out of the corner of our eyes. Of course, when we turned to look, there was never anything there. That went on for a year or two. Then it either stopped, or we just got used to it and stopped noticing. My ex and I split up in 2016, and after that, I didn't really experience anything similar for a long time. But lately, I'm starting to wonder if it's happening again. My current partner has never mentioned anything, so maybe it's just my own mind doing strange little shadow puppets in the dark. Over the last year, though, we've been working opposite shifts, which means I'm often home alone at night. In the front room, there's a desk against the wall to my left, and on it, I have a large smart TV that I use as a computer monitor. When the screen is off, it acts almost like a dark mirror. It faces toward the kitchen doorway. Over the last year or so, I've often thought I've seen a shadow reflected in that screen, always in my peripheral vision, never directly. The moment I look properly, there's nothing there. At night, I sometimes notice something similar near the kitchen. Light spills from the kitchen into the dining area of the front room because there's a doorway there, but no actual door. Now and then, I'll think I've seen something interrupt that light. Just a quick darkening at the edge of my vision. Again, I've tried to explain it away. Maybe I'm concentrating on the television or my laptop, and my eyes are adjusting badly between the bright screen and the darker room. That sounds reasonable enough. But the last few nights have been different. I've started hearing noises from one of the food cupboards in the kitchen. It's a lower cupboard under the counter, and it mostly has tins, jars, and some bags of pasta in it. The noise sounds like a cracking or clicking sound, almost as if something is nibbling or pressing against something inside. At first I thought, right, that'll be a mouse or a rat. My neighbors keep chickens, and where there are chickens, there are often rats. so it wouldn't be impossible for one to have found its way into the house somehow. But when I opened the cupboard, there was nothing there. No chewed packets, no droppings, no scratching, no scurrying, no sign of anything living in there at all. Just the noise. Then I started hearing something tapping against the metal Venetian blind in the kitchen as well. A small, sharp tapping sound. Not constant, but enough to make you pause and listen. Earlier tonight, the cracking noise started again. As soon as I went into the kitchen, it stopped. I stood there for a while, just listening, and after a bit it started again while I was still in the room. I quickly opened the cupboard, expecting to finally catch whatever it was. There was nothing inside. Nothing that I could see anyway. I am going to put down a rodent trap because that's the sensible thing to do. I'm not leaping straight to ghosts or anything. But I'll be honest, it feels odd. If it's a rodent, why is there no sound of it running away? Why is nothing chewed? Why are there no signs at all? I wouldn't say I'm a firm believer in the paranormal. I've never personally seen anything that would make me absolutely certain. But I do have an interest in it. I've watched paranormal channels online over the years. A lot of them are obviously fake, but I also watch a few where they try hard to debunk what they find. And every so often, they come across something they can't quite explain. So that's where I am with it. Maybe it's a rat. Maybe it's the house settling. Maybe it's my eyes and ears making stories out of ordinary things. But when you're alone at night and something starts cracking inside a cupboard that turns out to be empty, ordinary explanations don't feel quite as comforting as they should.